When a mother finally clocks out after a brutal double shift and rushes home, only to find her 9-year-old son huddled on the kitchen floor, his skin a map of fresh bruises, panic sends her straight back through the rain-slick streets to the nearest emergency room. But in the stark white exam bay, the boy's trembling whisper makes the attending physician's eyes go cold. One sentence from that small voice, and the doctor reaches for the phone, dialing 911 with a calm that barely masks his fury. Before we dive into this tense, emotional story about a medical team that refuses to look the other way, and the chilling revelation that forces law enforcement to act, tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe every child deserves to feel safe at home, hit like and subscribe for more. The fluorescent lights of Boston Memorial Hospital buzzed overhead as Sofia Martinez checked her watch for the 5th time in an hour, 10:47 p.m. Her shift had officially ended at 8 o'clock, but the pile of patient charts hadn't processed themselves, and the night nurse had called in sick again. The familiar ache in her lower back had spread to her shoulders, a physical manifestation of the weight she carried daily. "You should head home, Sofia," said Nurse Patel, her dark eyes softening with worry as she leaned against the counter. "You've been here since 6 o'clock this morning. That's almost 17 hours now." Sofia tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, revealing the deep shadows beneath her hazel eyes. I know. I'm just finishing Mrs. Donovan's discharge papers." Her fingers quivered slightly as she signed the last form. Exhaustion or caffeine. She couldn't distinguish between them anymore. "Your son's waiting, isn't he?" Patel asked, her voice dropping to a gentle murmur that somehow pierced Sofia more deeply than any reprimand could have. Ethan. The thought of her son waiting at home sent a complex mixture of love and guilt rushing through her. At 9 years old, he was too young to be alone, but her neighbor Mr. Hoffman had assured her it was no trouble to look in on him after school until she got home. "A retired educator has plenty of time," he'd said with that grandfatherly smile that had initially eased her concerns. "He's with Mr. Hoffman," Sofia replied, unable to meet Patel's eyes. "He's good with him." "Still," Patel insisted, taking the charts from Sofia's hands with gentle firmness. "Go. I've got this. That boy needs his mother." The drive home through Boston's rain-slick streets was a blur of red brake lights and green storefront signs reflecting in puddles. Sofia's thoughts drifted to the growing distance between her and Ethan. There had been a time when he would race to her, arms wide, face illuminated with joy regardless of how brief her absence. Now, at 9, he greeted her with shrugs and single-word responses, his attention fixed on his video games or drawing pad. Was this normal growing independence, or had her increasing absences created a gulf she hadn't noticed widening? The call from her mother's physician 3 weeks ago had only complicated matters. Congestive heart failure, they'd said, stable but requiring care. With her mother in a rehabilitation facility in Rhode Island and her sister deployed overseas with the military, the burden of weekend visits fell on Sofia's shoulders. Another responsibility, another absence from Ethan's life. The rain had transformed to a fine mist by the time Sofia pulled into the parking lot of their apartment building, a modest 3-story complex in Dorchester that had once been a textile factory. The conversion had left exposed brick walls and large windows, but also drafty corners and unreliable plumbing. Still, it was home, and the rent was manageable on a nurse's salary, if only barely. The building was quiet at nearly 11 o'clock, most windows dark except for the blue flicker of late-night television. Sofia climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell. She paused at apartment 3B, Mr. Hoffman's place, wondering if she should knock and thank him for watching Ethan again. The older man had been a godsend these past months, always ready with a kind word and helping hand. He had moved in about a year ago, a retired English teacher from somewhere in the Midwest, Kansas or Nebraska. She couldn't remember which. Fatigue won out over courtesy, and Sofia continued to 3D, her own apartment. She slipped her key into the lock as quietly as possible, hoping Ethan might still be awake. They hadn't had a real conversation in days. "Ethan," she called softly, stepping into the darkened living room. The television was off, and the apartment held that peculiar stillness of an empty space. "Sweetie, I'm home." No response. Sophia flicked on the light, revealing the modest living room with its second-hand furniture and walls decorated with Ethan's artwork. His backpack lay on the floor near the coffee table, homework spilled out beside it, math worksheets half completed with eraser marks smudging the margins. Ethan! A flutter of worry stirred in her chest as she moved toward his bedroom. The door was closed, unusual for this time of night. Normally, even when upset with her, he left it slightly ajar, a small night light casting star-shaped patterns on his ceiling. Tonight it was shut tight. Sophia knocked gently. "Ethan, honey, it's Mom." She pressed her ear to the door, hearing nothing but her own heartbeat. "I'm coming in, okay?" The door creaked as she pushed it open. The room was dark, save for the glow of streetlights filtering through the blinds, casting prison bar shadows across the rumpled bed. For a moment, Sophia thought the room was empty, and panic seized her throat. Then she saw him. Ethan was huddled in the far corner of his bed, back pressed against the wall, knees drawn up to his chest. He was still fully dressed in jeans and a long-sleeved Red Sox t-shirt, despite the lateness of the hour. His light brown hair fell across his forehead, concealing his eyes. "Ethan," Sophia whispered, relief giving way to concern at his unusual posture. "What are you doing sitting in the dark, sweetheart?" When he didn't respond, Sophia moved closer, perching on the edge of his bed. She reached for the lamp on his nightstand, but his voice stopped her. "Don't," he said, the word barely audible. "Please." There was something in his voice, a fragility Sophia had never heard before, that made her blood run cold. Maternal instinct surged through her exhaustion, senses suddenly alert to the wrongness of the moment. "Look at me," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the rising alarm within her. "What's wrong?" Slowly, painfully, Ethan raised his head in the dim light. Sophia could see the dark smudge on his cheek, what might have been a shadow if not for the unnatural swelling around his eye. Without thinking, she reached for the lamp again, needing to see. "Mom, don't." But it was too late. The soft glow of the bedside lamp illuminated what the darkness had mercifully hidden. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Ethan's right eye was swollen nearly shut, a purple-black bruise blooming across his cheekbone. His lower lip was split, a thin line of dried blood crusted at the corner of his mouth. When her eyes traveled down, she saw him clutching his right arm protectively against his side. "Oh my God!" she breathed, horror and fury rising in equal measure. "Ethan, what happened? Who did this to you?" Ethan's eyes darted to the window, then the door, before finally settling somewhere over Sophia's shoulder. "I can't tell you," he whispered. He said not to tell. The words landed like a physical blow. "He? Who is he, Ethan?" But Ethan pressed his lips together, wincing as the motion pulled at his split lip. A tear escaped, tracking down his bruised cheek. "I'm tired, Mom. Can I just go to sleep?" Sophia fought the urge to press further, recognizing the signs of withdrawal, of self-protection. 13 years in emergency medicine had taught her that pushing too hard too soon often caused victims to retreat further into silence. Victim. The word echoed in her mind, terrible and final. Her son was a victim, and she didn't know of what or whom. "We're going to the emergency room," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I need to get you checked out. Make sure nothing's broken." "But..." "No buts, Ethan. This is non-negotiable." She softened her voice, reaching out slowly to brush his hair from his forehead, careful to avoid the bruising. "I promise I'll be with you the whole time. We'll figure this out together. Okay?" Something in her words seemed to reach him, a tether thrown into deep water. He nodded once, the movement small and pained. "Can you walk? Or does it hurt too much?" "I can walk," he said, uncurling from his defensive position with the cautious movements of someone much older than 9. When he stood, Sophia noticed the slight hitch in his step, the way he kept his right arm pressed against his side. The drive to Boston Memorial was silent, save for the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers clearing the persistent mist. Sophia's mind raced, replaying the past weeks, searching for signs she might have missed. Had Ethan been quieter lately, more withdrawn? She had attributed any changes to her longer hours, to the normal turbulence of childhood, to her own distraction with her mother's illness. Guilt gnawed at her edges. She should have noticed, should have seen, should have protected him. But from whom? The question circled like a vulture. Who would hurt her son? A bully at school? Someone in the building? The possibilities multiplied, each more horrifying than the last. Boston Memorial's emergency entrance was painfully familiar to Sophia, though never before from this side. The sliding doors parted with a soft hiss, revealing the controlled chaos she usually navigated with professional detachment. Now, with Ethan beside her, the bright lights and antiseptic smells struck her as harsh, invasive. The triage nurse looked up, recognition dawning. "Sophia, what are you?" Then she saw Ethan, and her professional mask slipped back into place. "What happened?" "My son needs to be seen," Sophia said, placing a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. Possible facial fracture, potential rib or arm injury. The nurse, Andrea, who had covered shifts with Sophia for years, nodded, her eyes communicating what her voice wouldn't in front of Ethan. She recognized the signs as clearly as Sophia did. "Room 3 is open. I'll page Dr. Chen." She handed Sophia the clipboard with intake forms, her fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. "We'll take good care of him, Sophia." Room 3 was one of the smaller examination rooms, designed for non-critical cases that still required privacy. Sophia helped Ethan onto the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath him. She filled out the forms mechanically, aware of Ethan's eyes tracking her movements. "Mom." His voice was small, uncertain. "Am I in trouble?" The question pierced her. "No, baby," she said firmly, setting the clipboard aside. "You are not in trouble. Not at all. Someone hurt you, and that is never, ever your fault. Do you understand me?" He nodded, but the doubt lingering in his eyes told her he wasn't convinced. A soft knock preceded Dr. Michael Chen's entrance. In his early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, Dr. Chen was one of the few emergency physicians Sophia genuinely trusted with pediatric cases. His demeanor changed subtly as he recognized her. "Sophia," he said, surprise evident before his training reasserted itself. His eyes moved to Ethan, assessing professionally even as he maintained a gentle smile. "And this must be Ethan. I've heard a lot about you from your mom." Ethan didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I'm Dr. Chen," he continued, rolling up a stool to sit at eye level with Ethan. "Your mom works with me sometimes. Did you know that? She's one of our best nurses." A tiny flicker of pride crossed Ethan's face before disappearing back into weariness. "Looks like you've had a rough day," Dr. Chen said, keeping his voice conversational. "Mind if I take a look at those bruises?" Ethan glanced at Sophia, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, sweetie. Dr. Chen just needs to make sure you're all right." Dr. Chen's examination was thorough but gentle, his running commentary designed to put Ethan at ease. "I'm going to touch your cheek now, just very lightly. Let me know if anything hurts. Good job. Now I need to check your ribs. Can you take a deep breath for me?" Sophia watched, her heart constricting as Dr. Chen documented each injury. The facial bruising, the split lip, the tenderness along Ethan's ribs, the swelling in his right wrist. Not broken, probably sprained. The clinical descriptions couldn't capture the horror of seeing such injuries on her child. "Ethan," Dr. Chen said finally, his voice still gentle but with an underlying seriousness. "Can you tell me how you got hurt?" The silence stretched. Ethan's eyes darted to Sophia, then back to Dr. Chen. "I fell," he said, the same transparent lie he'd offered earlier. Dr. Chen nodded, unsurprised. "That must have been some fall. Were you at school when it happened?" Ethan shook his head. "At home." Then another head shake. Dr. Chen adjusted his approach. "Sometimes, Ethan, people get hurt because someone else hurts them. Has anyone been hurting you?" Ethan's breathing quickened, his uninjured hand clutching the paper covering on the examination table. "I'm not supposed to tell," he whispered. He said he'd hurt Mom if I told. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Ethan, she said, fighting to keep her voice level. No one is going to hurt me or you. You're safe here. We just want to help you. Dr. Chun continued with practiced calm. Whoever told you that was lying, Ethan. They said that to scare you, but they can't hurt you or your mom anymore. We won't let them. Something in Dr. Chen's quiet confidence seemed to reach Ethan. He looked up, tears welling in his eyes. It was Mr. Hoffman, he said, his voice barely audible. He said it was discipline, that I was bad. The name hit Sophia like a physical blow. Mr. Hoffman, the kindly retired teacher who had offered to watch Ethan, who had been alone with her son for hours each day while she worked, who had gained her trust with his gentle manner and helpful presence. When did this happen? Dr. Chun asked while Sophia struggled to process the revelation. Today and other days too. Ethan's voice grew smaller with each word. He said I was ungrateful, that Mom worked so hard and I don't appreciate it, that I needed to learn respect. Sophia's vision blurred with tears of rage and guilt. How had she not seen it? How had she left her child with this monster? Dr. Chun maintained his professional composure, though a muscle tightened in his jaw. Ethan, what Mr. Hoffman did was wrong. Very wrong. No adult should ever hurt a child, no matter what they say the reason is. He turned to Sophia, his expression grave. I need to call the police and file a report with Child Protective Services. This is a clear case of child abuse. The words child abuse echoed in the sterile examination room. Sophia nodded numbly, unable to form words past the knot of emotion in her throat. Dr. Chun moved toward the phone on the wall but paused, his hand hovering over the receiver. Is there anything else, Ethan? He asked, his voice gentle but insistent. Anything else, Mr. Hoffman, did that made you uncomfortable or scared? Ethan's eyes filled with fresh tears, his small body beginning to shake with suppressed sobs. He took pictures, he whispered, the words falling like stones. He said they were for a special project. That I was special. Dr. Chen's expression hardened, and he picked up the phone, dialing 911 with deliberate precision. This is Dr. Michael Chun at Boston Memorial Hospital Emergency Department, he said, voice steady and authoritative. I need to report a case of child abuse and possible exploitation. Yes, the victim is here with his mother. He covered the mouthpiece, turning to Sophia. Officers will be here soon. They'll want to talk to both of you. Sophia nodded, moving to sit beside Ethan on the examination table. She wanted to hold him, to wrap him in her arms and shield him from the world. But the way he held himself, tense, guarded, told her he wasn't ready for that. Instead, she placed her hand palm up on the table between them, an invitation rather than a demand. After a moment's hesitation, Ethan's small hand crept into hers, fingers curling with desperate strength around her own. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered, tears spilling down his bruised cheeks. I tried to be good. I really tried. Oh, Ethan. Sophia's voice broke as she finally allowed her own tears to fall. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. This wasn't your fault. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have protected you. Dr. Chen finished his call and approached them again. His demeanor softened with compassion. The police are on their way. They'll have a lot of questions, but there's a special detective who works with children. She's very nice. He handed Ethan a tissue, then Sophia. What happens next might be scary, but it's all to make sure you're safe, Ethan. To make sure Mr. Hoffman can't hurt you or anyone else. Ethan nodded, seeming to shrink further into himself at the mention of what was to come. Sophia tightened her grip on his hand, a silent promise. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Outside the examination room, the controlled chaos of the emergency department continued, oblivious to the small tragedy unfolding behind the closed door. Monitors beeped. Nurses called out vitals. Doctors moved between curtains with practiced efficiency. Sophia had always found comfort in the rhythm of it, the sense of purpose in the midst of crisis. Now, sitting beside her injured son in a room that suddenly felt too small, too exposed, that same environment felt alien and threatening. The longest night of her life had only just begun, and dawn seemed impossibly far away. Detective Elena Rivera had seen too many cases like this one. 15 years with Boston PD's Special Victims Unit had left her with a face that rarely betrayed emotion. But the photographs in the medical file made her jaw tighten imperceptibly. The bruising pattern on the boy's torso wasn't random. It was deliberate, methodical, the work of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The emergency department's family conference room was meant to be comforting, with its soft blue walls and framed watercolors of seascapes, but nothing could soften the reality of what had brought them here at 2:17 a.m. "Ms. Martinez," Detective Rivera began, her voice gentle but direct, "I understand this is incredibly difficult, but I need to ask Ethan some questions about what happened." Sophia sat rigid in her chair, the foam cup of hospital coffee cooling untouched between her hands. Sleep deprivation had hollowed her cheeks, giving her a haunted appearance that matched the devastation in her eyes. "He's only 9, she whispered. "He's been through enough tonight." Rivera nodded. Unlike many of her colleagues, she never rushed this part. The psychology of trauma was delicate. One wrong move could silence a child forever. "I understand. I've received special training to work with children who have experienced trauma. Ethan won't have to tell his story many times. Just once to me. I will record it with your permission to prevent him from having to repeat it." Sophia's gaze drifted to the small observation room where Ethan sat with a hospital social worker. Through the one-way glass, she could see him hunched over a drawing pad, his injured arm now properly wrapped in a supportive bandage. His small face was a canvas of bruises, the swelling around his eye having worsened in the hours since their arrival. "Will he have to see Mr. Hoffman again?" Sophia asked, the name catching in her throat like a shard of glass. "Not if I can help it," Rivera replied with quiet conviction. "We've already dispatched officers to Mr. Hoffman's apartment. If what Ethan says matches the evidence we find there, Hoffman won't be going anywhere except custody." Sophia closed her eyes, a single tear tracking down her cheek. "I trusted him. I let him into our lives. All those hours." Her voice broke, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Rivera leaned forward slightly. Her dark eyes held a compassion that came from understanding rather than pity. "Ms. Martinez, I need to say something that you might not believe right now, but it's important. This is not your fault." A bitter laugh escaped Sophia. "I'm a nurse. I'm trained to recognize signs of abuse. I left my son with a—" She lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "A predator. How is that not my fault? Abusers like Hoffman are experts at deception. They cultivate trust. They present themselves as helpers, especially to people who are vulnerable or overwhelmed." Rivera's tone remained steady. "They're counting on your self-blame to keep you silent, to protect them." The detective's words seemed to penetrate Sophia's armor of guilt, if only momentarily. She straightened in her chair, exhaustion giving way to a flash of anger. "What happens now with Hoffman? Based on Dr. Chen's report and the preliminary statement you've given, we'll arrest him. The district attorney will determine charges once we have Ethan's statement and process any evidence from Hoffman's apartment." Rivera glanced at her watch. "My colleagues should be executing a search warrant as we speak." Sophia's mind flashed to the apartment across the hall from hers. The bookshelves lined with classics, the framed teaching certificates, the photographs of smiling children from Hoffman's years as an educator. Had they all been prey? The thought made her physically ill. "When you interview Ethan," Sophia said, her voice steadier now, "I want to be there." Rivera considered this. Usually, children speak more freely without a parent present. They often try to protect their parents from the full truth. "He needs to know I'm not afraid to hear it," Sophia insisted. "That nothing he says will make me love him less." After a moment, Rivera nodded. "All right, but if at any point I feel his disclosure is being inhibited by your presence, I may ask you to step out. Can you agree to that?" "Yes," Sophia said, then added almost to herself, "I've been absent enough already." The interview room had been designed with children in mind. The chairs were lower, the table round rather than rectangular. A shelf held stuffed animals and fidget toys. A digital recording device sat unobtrusively in the center of the table, its red light the only indication of its purpose. Ethan sat beside Sophia, his uninjured hand clutching a small blue stress ball the social worker had given him. His eyes remained fixed on the swirling patterns in the industrial carpet. Detective Rivera sat across from them, her posture deliberately relaxed. She had removed her blazer and badge, leaving only a simple blouse and slacks. Nothing about her screamed, "Police!" A calculated decision to put Ethan at ease. "Hi, Ethan," she began, her voice warm but not falsely bright. "My name is Elena. My job is to talk to kids when grown-ups have done things that hurt them or scared them." Ethan's grip on the stress ball tightened, but he didn't look up. "There are no wrong answers to any questions I might ask," Rivera continued. "And if you don't know or don't remember something, that's perfectly okay to say. The most important thing is that you tell the truth, even if you think it might be scary or make someone upset. Do you understand?" A small nod. "Can you say it out loud for me, please? Just so I know you understand." "Yes." The word was barely audible. "Thank you, Ethan. That's really helpful." Rivera glanced at Sophia, then back to Ethan. "I know Dr. Chun already asked you some questions about how you got hurt. I'm going to ask some more questions about that. Okay?" Another tiny nod followed by a whispered, "Okay. Can you tell me who hurt you?" Ethan's breathing quickened, his eyes darting to Sophia and then back to the floor. Sophia fought the urge to speak, to reassure him, knowing that Rivera needed to establish her own rapport with him. "Mr. Hoffman," Ethan finally said, the name so soft it was almost inaudible. "Thank you for telling me that," Rivera said. "That was very brave. Can you tell me when this happened?" "Today, after school." Ethan's fingers worked the stress ball rhythmically. "And other times too." "When did it start?" "The first time." Ethan's brow furrowed in concentration. "After Mom started visiting Grandma in the hospital. When she had to work late too." Sophia felt each word like a physical blow. 3 weeks. Her son had been suffering for 3 weeks while she shuttled between work and her mother's bedside. "What happened the first time?" Rivera asked. Ethan's lower lip trembled. "I was playing my game too loud." He said the neighbors would complain, that Mom would get in trouble with the building manager. His voice grew stronger as he recounted the memory. "He said I needed discipline." "What did he do then, Ethan?" "He hit me with his belt on my legs." Ethan's free hand moved unconsciously to his thigh. "He said if I told Mom they'd make her move out because of me, that we'd be homeless." Sophia bit her lips so hard she tasted blood, trying to contain the sob that threatened to escape. Rivera gave her a warning glance before continuing. "Did it happen again after that first time?" Ethan nodded. "If I was too loud or didn't finish my homework or didn't eat the food he made." The words came faster now, as though a dam had broken. "He said Mom was working so hard and I was ungrateful, that I needed to learn to be a good boy." The clinical part of Sophia's mind, the nurse who had seen abuse cases in the ER, recognized the classic manipulation tactics. Isolation, blame, fear. The human part of her, the mother, wanted to tear apart the universe and rebuild it without men like Hoffman in it. "Ethan," Rivera continued, her tone gentle but persistent, "Dr. Chun mentioned that Mr. Hoffman took pictures of you. Can you tell me about that?" The change was immediate. Ethan curled further into himself, the stress ball now clutched so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I don't want to talk about the pictures," he whispered. "I know it's hard," Rivera said, "but it's very important." "Did he take pictures when he hurt you?" A small shake of the head. "Was it different times?" A nod. "Did he ask you to do things for the pictures or change your clothes?" Ethan's face crumpled, tears spilling down his bruised cheeks. "He said we were making special art, that I was his special friend." A shuddering breath. "I didn't want to, but he said he'd hurt Mom if I didn't." Sophia couldn't stop herself. She reached for Ethan's hand, careful not to crowd him but needing the physical connection. To her surprise, He gripped her fingers tightly as though anchoring himself. "You're doing so well, Ethan," Rivera said, her voice steady despite the horror of what she was hearing. "Just a few more questions, okay? Did Mr. Hoffman ever touch you in ways that made you uncomfortable?" Ethan's entire body tensed. The stress ball fell forgotten to the floor as he pressed himself against Sophia's side. "He tried," came the muffled reply. "Last week." But then Mrs. Gonzalez from upstairs knocked on the door. She brought cookies. His voice broke on the last word, relief and trauma intermingling. "Is that when he hurt you like he did today?" Rivera asked. Ethan nodded against Sophia's arm. "He said I'd done it on purpose, that I made noise so she would come. But I didn't, Mom," he said, looking up at Sophia with desperate intensity. "I promise I didn't. I was being quiet like he said." "I believe you, baby," Sophia whispered, her heart shattering all over again. "I believe you." Rivera gave them a moment before continuing. "Ethan, do you know if Mr. Hoffman has done this to other kids?" For the first time, confusion crossed Ethan's face. "I don't know. He has other kids visit sometimes. I hear them." Pause. "He has a room I'm not allowed to go in. He calls it his studio. That's where he takes the pictures." Rivera exchanged a significant look with Sophia over Ethan's head. This was no longer just about Ethan. This was potentially a serial predator with multiple victims. "You've been incredibly brave, Ethan," Rivera said, her voice warm with genuine admiration. "The things Mr. Hoffman did and said, none of that was your fault. He was wrong, not you." Ethan looked at her directly for the first time, searching her face for truth. "Is he going to jail?" "We're going to do everything we can to make sure he does," Rivera replied. "And you just helped us a lot by telling the truth." As if on cue, a soft knock came at the door and another detective poked his head in. "Detective Rivera? A word?" Rivera excused herself, leaving Sophia and Ethan in a moment of fragile silence. Sophia wanted to say something, anything to ease her son's pain. But what words could possibly bridge the chasm of trauma between them? "I'm sorry, Mom," Ethan whispered, his voice small yet somehow filling the entire room. "No," Sophia said fiercely, turning in her chair to look at him directly. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have protected you. I should have known." "He said you wouldn't believe me," Ethan continued as though he hadn't heard her. "That's why I didn't tell." Sophia felt her heart crack along new fault lines. "I will always believe you, Ethan. Always. No matter what." Ethan studied her face, searching for certainty. "Even when I mess up? Even then? Especially then?" Sophia fought to keep her voice steady. "Nothing you could ever do would make me stop loving you or believing in you. Nothing." Before Ethan could respond, the door opened again. Detective Rivera returned, followed by a woman in a crisp pantsuit carrying a leather portfolio. Her expression was professionally neutral, but the tension around her eyes betrayed the gravity of the situation. "Ms. Martinez, this is Veronica Blackwell from the Department of Children and Families," Rivera said. "She needs to speak with you about temporary arrangements for Ethan." Sophia's stomach dropped. "Arrangements? What do you mean?" "He's coming home with me." Ms. Blackwell took the seat Rivera had vacated. "Ms. Martinez, I understand this is difficult, but when allegations of abuse arise, we're required to assess the home situation." "He wasn't abused in our home," Sophia interrupted, her voice rising. "He was abused by a neighbor I trusted while I was working to support us." Ethan's voice trembled with fresh fear. "What's happening?" Blackwell's expression softened slightly. "Your mom is right, Ethan. You didn't do anything wrong. But part of my job is to make sure you're in a safe place while we sort everything out." "He is in a safe place," Sophia insisted, her arm tightening protectively around Ethan's shoulders. "With me, his mother." Rivera cleared her throat. "Ms. Martinez, we've recovered evidence from Mr. Hoffman's apartment. Photos, videos. It's worse than we thought." "I don't see how that's relevant to whether Ethan comes home with me," Sophia said, though a chill ran through her at the implications. It's relevant because there's evidence that suggests other children were involved, including some who may live in your building, Rivera explained carefully. Until we can determine the extent of Hoffman's network and activities, we need to ensure Ethan's continued safety. Sophia felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. You think there are others? Other predators? Rivera chose her words carefully, mindful of Ethan's presence. We don't know yet, but Hoffman's computer contained communications that suggest he wasn't acting entirely alone. The implications washed over Sophia in sickening waves. How deep did this go? Who else in their building, their community, was involved? Her eyes returned to Ethan, small and bruised beside her, and a fierce, primal protectiveness surged through her. He's not leaving my sight, she said flatly. You want to investigate? Fine. Place me under 24-hour surveillance if you have to, but I am not being separated from my son. Ms. Martinez, Blackwell began. It's Ms. Sophia corrected sharply. And I'm a registered nurse at this hospital. I have an apartment with a deadbolt and a bedroom for my son. I have no criminal record, no history of neglect or abuse. What I have is a job that requires long hours to keep a roof over our heads and a mother who's been ill. Yes, I made a horrible, unforgivable mistake in trusting Hoffman. But separating me from my son now would only compound his trauma. A tense silence followed her outburst. Ethan pressed closer to Sophia's side, his small body trembling. Finally, Rivera spoke. There may be a compromise, Ms. Blackwell. What about emergency placement with family, with Ms. Martinez present? Do they have relatives in the area who could temporarily move in? Before Blackwell could answer, Sophia's phone rang. The sound was jarring in the emotionally charged room. She glanced at the screen, recognition flashing across her face. It's my sister, she said, a note of disbelief in her voice. She's in the military Afghanistan. She never calls at this hour. Take it, Rivera encouraged. It might be relevant to our discussion. Sophia answered with a hesitant, Camila? The voice on the other end was tiny but clear enough for those in the room to hear. Soph, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. What's going on? The Red Cross message said there was a family emergency. Sophia's eyes widened. Red Cross? I didn't send any message. Well, someone did. My CO pulled me from patrol and told me to call home immediately. Said it was about Ethan. A look passed between Rivera and Blackwell. The timing was too coincidental. We're at the hospital now, Sophia said. Hospital? How is he? Is he okay? The fear in Camila's voice was palpable even through the phone's small speaker. Physically he'll recover, but... Sophia trailed off, unwilling to explain the full situation with Ethan right beside her. It's complicated. When can you come home? That's why I'm calling. I'm already on a transport to Bragg. They're emergency deploying me back to the States. I should be home within 48 hours. Relief flooded Sophia. Camila? Solid, dependable Camila, who had practically helped raise Ethan during his first years while Sophia finished nursing school, who had joined the military to help support them when Ethan's father disappeared before he was even born. Ms. Blackwell, Sophia said, newfound hope steadying her voice. My sister is a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army. She's being emergency deployed home and will be here within 2 days. Would her presence in our home satisfy your concerns about supervision? Blackwell considered this development. We would need to conduct a background check, but military service is generally viewed favorably. If she's willing to stay with you and provide additional supervision, it could work as a temporary arrangement. Camila, Sophia said into the phone, social services is involved. They're concerned about Ethan staying with just me. If you could stay with us when you get back. Of course, came the immediate reply. Whatever you need. Both of you. Plans were hastily made. Camila would call with her exact arrival time. In the meantime, Blackwell reluctantly agreed that Ethan could remain with Sophia, provided they stayed at the hospital until morning when a more thorough home safety assessment could be conducted. As the details were finalized, a heavy exhaustion settled over Sophia. The adrenaline that had sustained her was ebbing, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Ethan too was fading, his body slumping against hers as the emotional toll of the night caught up with him. Rivera noticed their fatigue. "There's a family room on this floor with a pull-out couch. Why don't you two try to get some rest? I'll have an officer posted outside. No one will bother you." Sophia nodded gratefully. What about him? She couldn't bring herself to say Hoffman's name again. "He's in custody," Rivera confirmed. "No bail. Given the nature of the evidence and the potential flight risk, he won't be getting anywhere near Ethan again." The family room was small but private, with a window overlooking the hospital's inner courtyard. The first pale light of dawn was just beginning to touch the eastern sky, turning the night's heavy clouds to a somber lavender. Sophia helped Ethan onto the pull-out couch, carefully arranging pillows to support his injured arm. "Try to sleep, sweetheart," she murmured, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "I'll be right here the whole time." Ethan looked up at her, exhaustion making his bruises stand out even more starkly against his pale skin. "Promise. I promise." Sophia settled beside him on top of the blankets, giving him space while remaining close. "I'm not going anywhere." Ethan's eyes drifted closed, his breathing gradually evening out. Sleep claimed him. Sophia watched him, this child who had endured unimaginable horrors while she remained oblivious. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, but she made no move to wipe them away. Outside the door, the officer Rivera had assigned stood at attention, a visible reminder that the danger had not entirely passed. Beyond him, the hospital was waking to another day. Shift changes, breakfast carts, the endless rhythm of medicine that had structured Sophia's life for so long. But in this small room, suspended between night and day, Sophia made a silent vow to her sleeping son. Things would change. She would change. The trust between them, so badly damaged by her absence and Hoffman's cruelty, would be rebuilt, stronger, unbreakable. Dawn broke fully over Boston, bathing the city in a cold, clear light. Sophia did not sleep. She kept vigil, her eyes never leaving Ethan's face, as though her gaze alone could protect him from the shadows that had already taken too much. The Dorchester Heights Community Center buzzed with tension. What had begun as an emergency neighborhood meeting about safety concerns had quickly revealed its true nature. A battleground. On one side sat Sophia Martinez, her sister Camila beside her in crisp civilian clothes that couldn't hide her military bearing. On the other, a cluster of residents led by Barbara Collins, the head of the building's tenant association and a 20-year fixture in the community. Between them stood Marcus Powell, the property manager, visibly uncomfortable in his role as mediator. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his perspiring face as he addressed the room of nearly 60 residents. "I want to emphasize that this meeting is not about assigning blame," Powell said, his voice strained. "It's about ensuring the safety of all residents moving forward." Barbara's voice cut through the murmurs. At 67, with steel-gray hair and a spine to match, she commanded attention without effort. "A respected member of our community has been arrested on allegations that have yet to be proven in court. Meanwhile, rumors are destroying the sense of security we've worked years to build." Sophia felt dozens of eyes shift to her. 3 weeks had passed since that terrible night in the hospital. 3 weeks of police interviews, social worker visits, and therapy appointments. 3 weeks of watching Ethan withdraw further into himself, jumping at shadows and waking screaming from nightmares. Camila's hand found Sophia's under the table, a silent show of support. Her sister had arrived exactly as promised, marching into the hospital with a duffel bag in hand less than 48 hours after their phone call. She'd taken emergency family leave, 12 weeks, and moved into their spare bedroom without hesitation, becoming Ethan's constant companion while Sophia navigated the labyrinth of legal and medical appointments. "These aren't merely allegations," Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The police found evidence in Mr. Hoffman's apartment." "Physical evidence?" countered Barbara. "William Hoffman taught children for 30 years without a single complaint. He volunteers at the Literacy Center. He's been nothing but an asset to this building since he moved in. He had a record, Detective Rivera interjected from her position near the wall. Though not officially part of the meeting, she'd come at Sophia's request. In Nebraska, 2 allegations were dropped when the families suddenly moved away. We've located one of those families. The pattern matches what happened here. A murmur rippled through the room. Barbara's supporters exchanged glances, some uncertain, others unmoved. If that's true, said Martin Green, a retired accountant from the 2nd floor, why wasn't it caught before he moved here? Don't they do background checks? Powell shifted uncomfortably. Our standard background check includes credit history, rental references, and a criminal record search. Mr. Hoffman had no convictions, just as Detective Rivera said. The allegations were sealed as part of the settlements. Settlements? Camila repeated, her voice carrying the sharp edge of her military training. He paid them off. Another ripple through the crowd, louder this time. Sophia scanned the faces around her. Some she recognized from years of hellos in the hallway or elevator. Others were strangers despite living mere walls away. How many had children? How many had left those children with Hoffman, believing, as she had, that he was a kindly retired teacher with time on his hands? Mrs. Gonzalez, Sophia said suddenly, addressing a Hispanic woman in her 40s who sat near the back, her 8-year-old son beside her. You brought cookies to Mr. Hoffman's apartment a few weeks ago. Do you remember? Mrs. Gonzalez nodded, confusion crossing her face. Yes, it was Thursday. I made too many for my cooking class. Why? Sophia hesitated, aware of Ethan's privacy but needing to make these people understand. You saved my son that day. Hoffman was about to. She couldn't finish, but her expression conveyed what words couldn't. Mrs. Gonzalez's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in horror. She pulled her son closer, whispering something in his ear before sending him to wait in the hallway with an older boy who must have been her son. Lucas spent time with Mr. Hoffman, Mrs. Gonzalez said after the children had gone, her voice trembling, for English tutoring. He said Mr. Hoffman was helping him prepare for the spelling bee. Her eyes sought Sophia's across the room, a mother's fear recognizing its twin. Did he? We're still investigating all potential victims, Rivera interrupted gently. But this is exactly why we're asking parents to speak with their children and report any concerning interactions. This is outrageous, Barbara broke in. We're treating a man as guilty before his trial. William has friends here, supporters. He deserves the presumption of innocence. And our children deserve protection, Sophia countered, a new fire in her voice. I'm not asking anyone to form a lynch mob. I'm asking parents to be aware, to talk to their kids, to look for signs I was too blind to see in my own son. A tense silence followed. Sophia could feel the room shifting, invisible lines being drawn as people processed the implications, deciding where they stood. Powell cleared his throat. In light of the ongoing investigation, the management company has implemented new security measures. Key fob access only to all exterior doors, security cameras in common areas. Background checks are being expanded for new tenants. A bit late for that, someone muttered. What about Hoffman's apartment? Asked a young father Sophia recognized from the playground. All his stuff is still there. My kids ask about him every time we pass his door. The apartment is considered a crime scene, Rivera explained. Once the investigation concludes, management will handle it according to tenant law and his lease. Is he expected to pay while incarcerated? Barbara pressed. Or is management planning to evict a man who has yet to be convicted? Powell's discomfort visibly increased. The legal department is reviewing our options. Mr. Hoffman paid 6 months' rent in advance when he moved in. There are still 4 months remaining on that payment. Sophia felt bile rise in her throat at the thought of Hoffman's presence lingering in the building through his possessions. His paid rent, his defenders like Barbara. Her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her notes, suddenly desperate to escape the suffocating tension of the room. I think we've covered the essential information, she said, rising from her chair. Detective Rivera has left contact information for anyone with concerns or information. The victim advocate's number is there as well for families who may need support. Barbara stood as well, her height allowing her to meet Sophia's gaze directly across the table. Sophia, no one is saying what happened to Ethan wasn't terrible. We're all devastated. But destroying a man's reputation before he's had his day in court. His day in court will come, Sophia interrupted, her voice low but intense. And when it does, Ethan will have to relive every moment of his trauma in front of strangers. He'll have to face the man who hurt him and be called a liar by defense attorneys. So forgive me if I don't share your concern for William Hoffman's reputation. Without waiting for a response, Sophia gathered her belongings and headed for the door, Camila close behind. As they crossed the room, Mrs. Gonzalez intercepted them, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "My Lucas," she said softly. "He has been having nightmares, refusing to do homework. I thought it was normal boy things, but now—" She pressed a slip of paper into Sophia's hand. "My number. Perhaps we could talk mother to mother." Sophia felt a complex wave of emotion. Grief for another child who might have suffered, relief at finding an ally, determination to create some meaning from their shared pain. "Of course," she said, tucking the paper carefully into her purse. Anytime. Outside, the early October evening had turned cool, leaves skittering across the community center parking lot in the brisk wind. Sophia took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air that didn't carry the weight of accusation and doubt. "You did good in there," Camila said, her arms slipping around Sophia's shoulders. "Even with the battle axe brigade against you." Sophia leaned into her sister's strength, allowing herself this brief moment of weakness. "They're scared, Cam. It's easier to believe I'm overreacting or Ethan is confused than to accept that they might have left their children with a predator. Maybe, or maybe they're just—" Camila's bluntness, honed by years in a male-dominated military, was oddly comforting in its familiarity. "Come on, let's get back to Ethan. That new art therapist is coming at 7, right?" The mention of Ethan redirected Sophia's focus. Her son had been with Mrs. Harrison, their elderly neighbor who had stepped forward to help after learning what happened. Unlike some in the building, Mrs. Harrison had never doubted Ethan's account. Perhaps because, as she'd confided to Sophia, her own brother had suffered similar abuse as a child. "Yes, Dr. Franklin. She specializes in trauma work with children. The victim advocate says she's the best." As they walked to Camila's car, Sophia's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but with so many agencies and officials involved in Ethan's case, she'd learned to answer every call. "Hello, Ms. Martinez? This is Michael Torres from the district attorney's office." Sophia tensed. Torres was the prosecutor assigned to Ethan's case, a serious man with kind eyes that belied his reputation as a relentless advocate for child victims. "Mr. Torres, is everything okay? I was hoping we could meet tomorrow. There have been some developments in the case that I'd like to discuss in person." "Developments?" Sophia stopped walking, causing Camila to turn back with a questioning look. "Good or bad?" Torres's pause was slight but noticeable. "Complex. What time works for you?" They arranged to meet at his office the following morning. By the time Sophia hung up, her momentary relief at escaping the community center had evaporated, replaced by a familiar anxiety that had become her constant companion. "The DA wants to meet," she explained to Camila as they resumed walking. "Won't say why over the phone, which is never a good sign." Camila's expression hardened. "Want me to come with you? I can reschedule Ethan's physical therapy." Sophia considered it. Having Camila there would be a comfort, but Ethan needed stability and routine more than Sophia needed emotional support. "No, stay with him. Keep everything as normal as possible." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Besides, how bad could it be? They've got photos, videos, Ethan's testimony. Hoffman's going away for a long time." But even as she said it, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Dr. Sarah Franklin's office was deliberately unlike a traditional therapist's space. No leather couch, no desk creating barriers between her and her young clients. Instead, the room resembled an art studio, with easels set up near large windows, shelves filled with art supplies of every description, and walls covered in children's artwork. Ethan sat cross-legged on a large cushion on the floor, a sketch pad balanced on his knees. His physical bruises had faded to yellowish shadows over the past 3 weeks, but the weariness in his eyes remained unchanged. Dr. Franklin sat nearby, giving him space while remaining accessible. At 35, with warm brown skin and a cloud of natural curls framing her face, she had the rare ability to put children at ease without trying. She had been working with Ethan for 2 weeks, slowly building trust. "You're using a lot of black today," she observed, her tone merely curious, not judgmental. Ethan glanced up briefly, then returned to his drawing. The page was dominated by a large house rendered in heavy black lines. Most tellingly, it had no doors, only windows with what appeared to be bars across them. "It's not a happy place," he said after a long pause. "The house in your drawing?" Ethan nodded, adding more bars to a window. "It's where the bad things happen." Dr. Franklin watched him work, noting the intensity with which he pressed the pencil to paper, the careful attention to certain details while others remained abstract. "Is it a house you know?" she asked. Ethan's hand stilled. "Sort of. It's like Mr. Hoffman's apartment, but worse, bigger." This was new. In previous sessions, Ethan had drawn abstract representations of his feelings or safe places he imagined. This was the first direct reference to Hoffman or the abuse. "Worse how?" Dr. Franklin kept her voice neutral, even as she recognized the potential significance of this shift. Ethan resumed drawing, adding a small figure near one of the barred windows. "More kids. More rooms where you're not supposed to go." His voice dropped to a whisper. "More bad men." Dr. Franklin felt a chill despite the warmth of the sunlit room. Child psychology had taught her to listen not just to what children said, but to what they left unsaid. "Ethan," she said gently, "did Mr. Hoffman ever take you to another house or have other adults visit when you were there?" Ethan shook his head, then hesitated. "Not me, but he talked about it. About other special friends who had special houses for kids who were really good at the picture project." Dr. Franklin maintained her composed expression through years of professional practice, but her mind was racing. If Hoffman was part of a network, if he was grooming children for other predators, the case had just expanded beyond a single abuser. Did he ever mention names of these other friends or the houses? Ethan's pencil pressed harder, the lead breaking with a small snap. "I don't remember." His breathing quickened, a sign of anxiety Dr. Franklin had learned to recognize. "Can I draw something else now?" "Of course." Dr. Franklin reached for a new sketch pad. "How about we try something different? Can you draw what makes you feel safe?" The shift in focus visibly relaxed Ethan. He set aside the house drawing and began sketching on the new pad. Stick figures that were clearly his mother and aunt holding hands with a smaller figure between them. Dr. Franklin made a mental note to speak with Detective Rivera as soon as the session ended. If Hoffman was connected to a larger network, the investigation needed to expand immediately, and Sophia needed to be prepared for what this might mean for Ethan and the case. The district attorney's office occupied 3 floors of a government building in downtown Boston. Michael Torres's corner office offered views of the harbor, though today the water was obscured by a heavy fog that seemed to hang just outside the windows like a shroud. Sophia sat stiffly in the chair across from Torres's desk, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from visibly trembling. The prosecutor was reviewing documents in a thick file, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. At 48, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered look of someone who had seen too much of humanity's darkness, Torres had a reputation for being tough but fair. Beside him sat Detective Rivera, her expression carefully neutral. The presence of both the prosecutor and the detective heightened Sophia's anxiety. This wasn't a routine update. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Martinez," Torres said finally, closing the file. "I know these past weeks have been incredibly difficult for you and Ethan. Just tell me what's happened," Sophia said, her patience for pleasantries exhausted. Weeks of bureaucratic navigation had stripped away her tolerance for small talk. Torres nodded, respecting her directness. We've uncovered evidence that William Hoffman was not acting alone. Digital forensics found encrypted communications on his computer linking him to at least 3 other individuals involved in child exploitation. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. What does that mean for Ethan's case? It means the scope has expanded, Rivera explained. What began as a case against one offender is now a multi-jurisdictional investigation into a potential trafficking network. The word trafficking hung in the air, its weight almost unbearable. Sophia had worked enough shifts to know what it meant. Children bought and sold, moved from abuser to abuser like commodities. Was Ethan? She couldn't finish the question. No, Torres said firmly. Based on all evidence and Ethan's statements, Hoffman had not yet involved him in that aspect of the operation, but he was grooming him, preparing him. The special project Ethan mentioned was part of that process. Relief, sharp and temporary, washed over Sophia. Then why are you telling me this if it doesn't directly involve Ethan? Because it changes how we approach Hoffman's prosecution, Torres explained gently. We're now looking at federal charges in addition to state charges. Multiple agencies are involved. He hesitated, exchanging a glance with Rivera. And, Sophia prompted, dread pooling in her stomach. Hoffman's attorney has reached out about a potential plea deal. He's offering information about the network in exchange for consideration in sentencing. No! The word burst from Sophia before she could stop it. Absolutely not. He tortured my son, took pictures, threatened him. And you want to offer him a deal? Torres leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. I understand your anger, Ms. Martinez, but consider this. Hoffman going to trial means Ethan testifying, being cross-examined by defense attorneys who will try to discredit him. It means those photos potentially being entered into evidence. It means years of appeals and parole hearings repeatedly dragging Ethan back into the trauma. A plea deal, if properly structured, Rivera added, could spare Ethan that ordeal while still ensuring Hoffman serves significant time. More importantly, it could lead to the identification and prosecution of others in the network, potentially saving dozens of children from abuse. Sophia felt trapped between impossible choices. The thought of Hoffman receiving any leniency made her physically ill. Yet the prospect of Ethan enduring a trial, facing his abuser, being questioned and doubted, that was equally unbearable. What would the deal look like? She asked finally, the words tasting like ash. 20 to 25 years, no possibility of parole for at least 15, Torres replied. Sex offender registration for life, a permanent restraining order protecting Ethan, and full cooperation in the investigation and prosecution of his associates. Without the deal, what's he looking at? Maximum of 40 years on the state charges, but with a good attorney, multiple appeals, the possibility of parole after 10 to 12 years exists, and no guarantee he'd provide information on the network. Sophia closed her eyes, trying to process. The system that was supposed to protect children seemed designed instead to offer second chances to those who harmed them. How could she explain any of this to Ethan? I need to think about it, she said finally, and discuss it with Ethan's therapist. This isn't just my decision. Torres nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course, but we'll need an answer within the week. Hoffman's attorney is pushing, and we can't afford to lose his cooperation if it means shutting down this network. As Sophia rose to leave, Rivera touched her arm lightly. There's one more thing you should know. Dr. Franklin called me after Ethan's session yesterday. He drew a house, mentioned other bad men and children. It aligns with what we're finding in Hoffman's communications. A cold dread settled over Sophia. What are you saying? Ethan may know more than he's consciously told us, Rivera explained gently. Hoffman might have spoken more freely around him than we realized, which means he could be a key witness against not just Hoffman but others in the network. If it comes to that, Torres finished. Sophia felt her world tilting yet again, the ground beneath her feet no longer stable. She had wanted justice for her son, protection for other children. But at what cost to Ethan's recovery? I'll let you know about the plea deal, she said numbly, gathering her purse. But I won't let you turn my son into your star witness against a trafficking ring. He's been through enough. Torres's expression was sympathetic but resolute. Ms. Martinez, if there comes a point where Ethan's testimony could prevent other children from suffering as he did, I hope you'll reconsider. The implied ultimatum wasn't lost on Sophia. Help them willingly or be compelled by subpoena. The justice system, it seemed, could be as cruel in its mercy as in its punishment. The Art Therapy Center was housed in a converted Victorian home in Jamaica Plain, its bright yellow exterior a deliberate contrast to the serious work that happened inside. Sophia sat in the waiting area, thumbing mindlessly through a magazine, while Ethan worked with Dr. Franklin in a session room down the hall. Her meeting with Torres and Rivera had left her shaken, uncertain which path would best protect Ethan. The plea deal would spare him a trial but leave the lingering question of whether justice had truly been served. Fighting for maximum punishment would mean subjecting her already traumatized son to the additional ordeal of testifying. And now this new complication, Ethan's drawings suggesting knowledge of a larger network. How much had he seen? How much had Hoffman revealed, perhaps not realizing the significance of what he was sharing with a child he considered under his control? Ms. Martinez? Sophia looked up to find Dr. Franklin standing in the doorway. Her expression was serious but not alarming. Ethan wasn't with her. Is everything okay? Sophia asked, setting aside the magazine. Ethan is finishing up a drawing. I wanted to speak with you privately first. Dr. Franklin took the seat beside Sophia, turning to face her directly. Today's session was significant. Ethan produced several drawings that provide important insights into his experiences. Detective Rivera mentioned you called her about yesterday's drawing. The house. Dr. Franklin nodded. Yes, and today he expanded on that theme. But what I want to discuss goes beyond potential evidence. She paused, choosing her words carefully. One of Ethan's drawings today was particularly detailed. It shows what appears to be a specific location, a room with distinctive features that he describes as the picture room in Mr. Hoffman's apartment. Sophia's pulse quickened. I thought the police searched the entire apartment? They did, but according to Ethan's drawing, there's a hidden space accessible through what looks like a regular closet. He was very precise about its location and how to access it. Why would he draw that now, after all these weeks? Dr. Franklin's expression softened with understanding. Trauma doesn't process linearly, Ms. Martinez. Ethan is feeling safer, more supported. As that safety grows, his brain is allowing him to access memories that were too threatening before. Or he's making things up, Sophia said, voicing the doubt that would inevitably come from Hoffman's defenders, creating fantasy scenarios to please the adults questioning him. I've been working with traumatized children for 15 years, Dr. Franklin said, her voice gentle but firm. Ethan's drawings exhibit a level of detail and consistency that invention rarely achieves. More importantly, they contain elements he would have no way of knowing unless he'd experienced them directly. She handed Sophia a folder containing copies of Ethan's drawings. I've already shared the originals with Detective Rivera. She'll be obtaining an additional search warrant based on this new information. Sophia opened the folder with trembling hands. The first drawing showed the familiar layout of Hoffman's apartment, rendered with surprising accuracy for a 9-year-old. But off the bedroom was a space Sophia had never seen. A small room with cameras, lighting equipment, and what appeared to be a bed. Ethan had labeled it the secret room in his childish handwriting. The second drawing was a close-up of a bookshelf with an arrow pointing to a specific book, Mythology Stories, indicating it was somehow significant. The third showed a small door behind the shelf. But it was the fourth drawing that made Sophia's blood run cold. A stark barred window above a simple bed with small shapes that might have been children sitting on the floor. In the corner stood a stick figure labeled Mr. H, holding what looked like a camera, and beside him, another figure, taller with a shock of red hair labeled simply the other man. He drew another person, Sophia whispered. Hoffman wasn't working alone. Dr. Franklin nodded gravely. As your prosecutor has already discovered, Ethan's drawing suggests he witnessed interaction between Hoffman and at least one other member of the network. Sophia closed the folder, unable to look at the images any longer. What does this mean for Ethan? For the case? It means, Dr. Franklin said carefully, that Ethan possesses information of significant value to the investigation. Whether and how that information is used will depend on many factors, including your decisions as his parent and the judgment of the investigative team. They want him to testify, Sophia said, the words bitter on her tongue. Not just against Hoffman now, but against an entire network. That would be one option, Dr. Franklin acknowledged, but there are others. Ethan's drawings might provide sufficient evidence without requiring his direct testimony, or his information might simply lead investigators to other evidence. She placed her hand gently on Sophia's arm. No matter what, my priority, and I hope everyone else's, remains Ethan's healing. Before Sophia could respond, the door to the therapy room opened, and Ethan emerged, clutching a new drawing. His face looked lighter than it had in weeks, as though unburdening himself of these secrets had eased some invisible weight. "Mom," he said, holding out the paper. "I drew this for you." Unlike the stark, troubling images in the folder, this drawing showed three figures holding hands under a bright sun. A woman with long brown hair, a boy in the middle, and a taller woman in what looked like military fatigues. Along the bottom, Ethan had written in careful letters, "My family." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes as she took the drawing. "It's beautiful, buddy. Is this us?" Ethan nodded, pride visible beneath his usual caution. "You and me and Aunt Camilla. Dr. Franklin said I should draw what makes me feel safe." The simple statement cut through Sophia's swirling thoughts, bringing clarity. Whatever decisions lay ahead, plea deals, testimony, investigations, this was what mattered. Ethan feeling safe, Ethan healing, Ethan reclaiming his childhood from the shadows Hoffman had cast. "I love it," she said, drawing him carefully into a hug that he didn't flinch from for the first time since that terrible night. "And I love you." Over Ethan's head, she met Dr. Franklin's gaze. The therapist gave a small nod of approval and something more, a silent acknowledgement of the difficult path ahead and the strength Sophia would need to navigate it. As they left the center, Ethan's hand tucked trustingly in hers. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rivera. "Search warrant approved. Executing tonight. Call me tomorrow." Sophia slipped the phone back into her pocket without responding. Tonight was for Ethan, for normal things like dinner and homework, and perhaps, if he was willing, a short walk to the park that had once been his favorite place. The battle for justice, with all its compromises and complications, would still be there tomorrow. The October afternoon had turned golden, sunlight filtering through trees just beginning to turn. Overhead, a flock of geese flew in perfect formation, heading south for winter. Ethan pointed up at them, his face momentarily alight with the simple wonder of a child. Sophia watched him, memorizing the moment, storing it against the darker days she knew still lay ahead. The battle lines had been drawn, not just between those who believed Ethan and those who defended Hoffman, but between justice and healing, between the needs of one child and the protection of many. And Sophia stood at the center of it all, trying to find a path forward that wouldn't require sacrificing her son's recovery on the altar of the greater good. "Mom!" Ethan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are you okay?" Sophia squeezed his hand gently. "Yes, buddy, I'm okay. Let's go home." But as they walked toward the subway, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that their definition of home had been irreparably changed. The apartment that had once been their sanctuary now felt contaminated by its proximity to Hoffman's, by the knowledge that just across the hall, evidence of unspeakable crimes might still be hidden behind a bookshelf. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new decisions. For tonight, Sophia would focus on the small victory represented by Ethan's drawing, the knowledge that despite everything, he still had a place where he felt safe. It wasn't much, perhaps, but in the storm they were weathering, it was enough to keep them afloat for one more day. Sophia stared at the ceiling of her bedroom, watching dawn gradually paint it in shades of pale gold. Sleep had eluded her again, her mind too occupied with the weight of decisions that seemed to have no right answers. Beside her on the nightstand lay a legal document, the prosecutor's formal offer of a plea deal for William Hoffman. 25 years with the possibility of parole after 18, sex offender registration, restraining orders, and most importantly, Ethan spared from testifying, from being cross-examined, from facing the man who had stolen his innocence. All it would cost was the certainty of Hoffman paying the full price for his crimes. All it would require was Sophia signing away her demand for absolute justice. The buzz of her phone startled her. Detective Rivera. Even at 5:47 a.m. "Hello," Sophia answered, her voice rough from lack of sleep. "We found it," Rivera said without preamble. Exactly where Ethan's drawing showed. A hidden room behind the bookcase in Hoffman's bedroom, accessed by pulling out a specific book, a volume of Greek mythology. Sophia sat up suddenly, fully awake. "What was inside?" "Evidence," Rivera replied, her professional tone not quite hiding her disgust. "Photos, videos, documentation of activities, but also ledgers, correspondence, electronic devices, names. Ms. Martinez, many names. Some victims, yes, but also clients, collaborators. This is bigger than we initially thought." There was a pause before Rivera continued. "There was a red-haired man in many of the photos, just as Ethan drew." Sophia's free hand gripped the bed sheet until her knuckles whitened. Ethan's drawing had been accurate, painfully, terrifyingly accurate, which meant everything else he'd drawn, everything he disclosed in those silent, careful sketches, was likely true as well. "What does this mean for the case?" she asked. "It means the federal investigation just expanded exponentially." Rivera hesitated. "It means Ethan's information is even more valuable than we realized. The prosecutor will want to discuss how to proceed." Sophia glanced at the plea agreement on her nightstand. Torres already sent over the paperwork for Hoffman's deal. 25 years. That was before we found this room, before we understood the full scope. Rivera's voice softened slightly. "The offer might change now, for better or worse. Hoffman's information is worth more to us, but so is a conviction based on this new evidence." After hanging up, Sophia sat motionless, watching the rectangle of sunlight on her wall grow brighter. Outside her bedroom, the apartment was quiet. Camila had taken the early shift, allowing Sophia a few hours to sleep after another late night of discussions with the prosecutor and victim advocates. The discovery of the hidden room changed everything and nothing. It validated Ethan's account, providing irrefutable evidence of Hoffman's crimes, but it also thrust them deeper into an investigation that seemed to grow more complex with each passing day. Sophia reached for the plea agreement, skimming its clinical language once more. 25 years had seemed insufficient for the man who had tortured her son. But if signing meant Ethan could begin healing without the additional trauma of a trial. With sudden decision, Sophia tore the document in half, then quarters, then eighths. Whatever deal might be offered now, it would be different. The landscape had shifted overnight, and she would not make this decision alone. Ethan sat in Dr. Franklin's office, his legs dangling from the chair, not quite reaching the floor. 2 months had passed since that first night in the emergency room. The physical bruises had faded completely, though he still favored his right wrist occasionally when tired. Today they were not drawing. Today was for talking. A step Dr. Franklin had approached carefully, allowing Ethan to set the pace for when words might accompany his powerful images. "The police found the room you drew," Dr. Franklin said, her voice level. "You helped them discover very important evidence." Ethan's eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and vindication crossing his face. "They found the secret door behind the mythology book?" "Yes, exactly where you showed them. You have an excellent memory for details." Ethan picked at a loose thread on his jeans. "Mr. Hoffman said I was observant. That's why he chose me for his project." Dr. Franklin noted the lack of fear in Ethan's voice when mentioning Hoffman was a significant improvement from the early sessions when he would physically withdraw at the slightest reference to his abuser. "What do you think he meant by that?" she asked. Ethan considered the question with the seriousness of a much older child. "He said some kids don't notice things, but I do. I remember things. Like the red-haired man in your drawing. Was he someone you saw at Mr. Hoffman's apartment?" Ethan nodded slowly. "He came to look at the pictures. He had a funny accent, not like from here." Dr. Franklin made a note. This aligned with what Rivera had shared, that many of Hoffman's connections appeared to be international. Did the red-haired man ever hurt you? No. Ethan's response was immediate. Mr. Hoffman wouldn't let him near me. He said I wasn't ready yet. A shadow crossed his face. But there were pictures of other kids with him on Mr. Hoffman's computer. Dr. Franklin controlled her expression carefully, though her heart raced at this new information. Ethan had never mentioned seeing images of other victims. That must have been confusing and scary to see, she said. I thought they were playing a game at first, Ethan admitted, his voice small. But then I saw their faces. They looked scared, like how I felt when Mr. Hoffman got mad. He looked up, his amber eyes suddenly intense. Are they okay? Those other kids? The question caught Dr. Franklin off guard. In all her years working with trauma victims, she had rarely encountered a child who, in the midst of their own pain, expressed such concern for others. The police are working very hard to find them and make sure they're safe, she said. It wasn't the whole truth. Some of those children might never be found, might never receive the help they needed. But it was the truth Ethan needed right now. Is that why they want me to talk in court? To help find them? So he knew about the possibility of testifying. Dr. Franklin made another mental note to discuss this with Sophia. Partly, she acknowledged. Your memories and what you've drawn have already helped the police a lot. But whether you speak in court is a decision for you and your mom to make together. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers working the thread on his jeans until it came loose. I'm scared to see him again, he finally whispered. Mr. Hoffman, what if he's still mad at me? What if he hurts Mom like he said he would? Mr. Hoffman is in jail, Dr. Franklin reminded him gently. He can't hurt you or your mom anymore. And in a courtroom, there would be many people there to protect you. Police officers, the judge, your mom, me if you wanted me there. Ethan absorbed this, his expression thoughtful rather than fearful. The other kids didn't have anyone to protect them, he said after a moment. In the pictures, they were alone. Dr. Franklin felt a tightness in her chest. The professional distance she maintained with all her clients momentarily challenged by this child's compassion in the face of his own trauma. Sometimes, she said carefully, when scary things happen to us, we can use those experiences to help others, but that's never an obligation. Your first job is to take care of yourself, to heal. Ethan considered this, then reached for the sketch pad that was never far from his side these days. Can I draw something? Of course. He worked silently for several minutes, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he finished, he held up the drawing. It showed a small figure standing before what appeared to be a judge's bench, with larger figures, clearly adults, standing protectively around him. Above, in careful letters, he had written, "Helping the other kids." Dr. Franklin studied the image, noting both the anxiety evident in the small figure's posture and the determination in the carefully drawn face. Is this you in court? Ethan nodded. If I talk about what happened, will it help the police find the other kids? The ones in the pictures? It might, Dr. Franklin said honestly. But Ethan, this has to be your choice. No one should make you do this if you're not ready. Ethan's gaze dropped to his drawing again. Mom's scared for me to do it. I hear her talking to Aunt Camila at night sometimes. She doesn't want me to get hurt more. That's because she loves you very much. I know. Ethan set the drawing aside. But I think maybe I want to try to talk about it. Not just here, but in court too. His voice grew smaller. If Mom says it's okay. Dr. Franklin recognized the significance of this moment. A child reclaiming agency after having it violently taken away. Whatever happened next, Ethan had taken a crucial step in his healing journey. I think your mom will be very proud of your bravery, she said. But she'll also want to make sure you understand what testifying means. Can be difficult even for adults. Can we practice? Like a pretend court? So I know what it's like. Dr. Franklin smiled gently. Yes, we can do that. There are special people called victim advocates who can help you prepare. Show you a courtroom when it's empty. Explain exactly what will happen. For the first time in their sessions, Ethan's posture relaxed completely. He had made a decision, perhaps his first autonomous choice since the abuse began, and the very act of deciding seemed to have restored something essential that Hoffman had tried to take from him. "I'm scared," he admitted, "but I think I can do it." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared," Dr. Franklin told him. "It means doing what's right even when you are scared." Ethan nodded solemnly, wisdom beyond his years briefly visible in his young face. "Like Mom," he said. "She's scared too, but she keeps fighting." The courthouse hallway gleamed with sterile fluorescence, its marble floors reflecting Sophia's anxious pacing. 3 months after that first emergency room visit, the preliminary hearing for William Hoffman was finally underway. Not the trial itself, that was still months away, but the proceeding that would determine if there was sufficient evidence to move forward with all charges, including now federal charges related to child trafficking and exploitation across state lines. Charges that carried potential life sentences. Sophia had spent weeks wrestling with the decision to allow Ethan to testify. Sleepless nights arguing with Camila, hours in consultation with Dr. Franklin, victim advocates, and the prosecutors. In the end, it had been Ethan himself who had tipped the scales. "I want to help the other kids," he had said, his small face set with determination that broke Sophia's heart and filled it with pride simultaneously. "Mr. Hoffman can't hurt me anymore, but he might still be hurting them." Sophia had set conditions, rigid, non-negotiable requirements for how Ethan's testimony would be handled. He would not be alone on the stand. He would not have to directly face Hoffman. He would have breaks whenever needed. A therapy dog would be present. Dr. Franklin would be in the courtroom. And at the first sign of distress, testimony would end, regardless of the legal consequences. "Ms. Martinez?" Sophia turned to find Michael Torres approaching, his expression cautiously optimistic. "They're ready for Ethan," he said. "Judge Wilson has approved all the accommodations we requested. Hoffman will be seated where Ethan can't see him, and the therapy dog is already in place." Sophia nodded, trying to swallow past the tightness in her throat. "Have you identified him yet?" Torres's expression tightened. "Yes, Interpol had him on their watch list. Anton Klov, a Russian national with ties to Eastern European trafficking networks. He's still at large, but there's an international warrant for his arrest." The knowledge that one of the men in the photographs, one of the men who had viewed Ethan as potential prey, was still free made Sophia's skin crawl. But she pushed the thought aside. Today was about Hoffman, one monster at a time. "I'll get Ethan," she said, turning toward the small conference room where Camila waited with him. "Is Detective Rivera here?" "Front row," Torres confirmed, along with representatives from the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit. "This case has their full attention now." Inside the conference room, Ethan sat beside Camila, dressed in the navy blue blazer and khaki pants they had purchased for the occasion. His hair was neatly combed, and he clutched a small stone, a courage stone Dr. Franklin had given him, in his right hand. "Hey, buddy," Sophia said, keeping her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "It's time. Are you ready?" Ethan looked up, his amber eyes serious but clear. "Is Bear there?" Bear was the golden retriever therapy dog who had worked with Ethan during his preparation sessions. "Yes, he's waiting for you in the courtroom," Sophia assured him. "And Dr. Franklin is there too. You remember what we practiced?" Ethan nodded. "Answer the questions truthfully. If I don't know something, I say I don't know. If I need a break, I ask for one, and I can look at you or Dr. Franklin or Bear whenever I want." Sophia knelt before him, straightening his already straight tie. "That's right. And what's the most important thing to remember? That none of what happened was my fault," Ethan recited. "And that I'm safe now." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them away. "Exactly. I am so proud of you, Ethan. No matter what happens in there, I want you to know that." Ethan's small hand reached out to touch her cheek, a gesture of comfort that should have been hers to give, not his to offer. "It's okay, Mom. I can do this." Camila, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, stood and adjusted her own blazer, the closest thing to a uniform she had packed for what was supposed to be a brief emergency leave. 3 months later, she remarked, having extended her leave to its maximum limit. All right, Martinez family, she said, her military bearing providing the structure they both needed in this moment. Let's go show them what we're made of. The courtroom was more crowded than Sophia had expected. Beyond the usual legal personnel, several rows were filled with observers, detectives, FBI agents, victim advocates, and, most surprisingly, parents of other potential victims identified from Hoffman's records. Mrs. Gonzalez sat near the front, her husband beside her, both nodding encouragingly as Ethan entered. Hoffman sat at the defense table, his once grandfatherly appearance now diminished by 3 months in custody. His gray hair had thinned, and his shoulders hunched forward in the ill-fitting suit provided by his attorney. As promised, he was positioned where Ethan wouldn't have to see him, though Sophia felt his gaze like a physical weight as they walked to their seats. A large golden retriever with gentle eyes, and a specially designed vest identifying him as a courthouse therapy dog, waited beside the witness stand. At the sight of Ethan, his tail thumped once against the floor in restrained greeting. "The court calls Ethan Martinez," the bailiff announced after preliminary matters were addressed. Sophia squeezed Ethan's hand one last time before he walked forward, small but straight-backed, to be sworn in. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, spoke directly to him. "Ethan, do you understand why you're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan replied, his voice soft but clear in the hushed courtroom. "To tell the truth about what Mr. Hoffman did." "That's right. And do you understand the oath you just took?" "To tell the truth?" Ethan nodded, then remembered to speak aloud. "Yes, it means I promise to only say things that really happened, not make anything up." The judge smiled slightly. "Very good. Now the lawyers are going to ask you some questions. If you don't understand something or if you need a break, what will you do?" "I'll tell you," Ethan said. "And I can pet Bear if I get scared." "That's exactly right," the judge said. She turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Torres, you may proceed." What followed was both better and worse than Sophia had feared. Torres was gentle but thorough, guiding Ethan through his relationship with Hoffman from the beginning, the initial kindness, the gradual boundary violations, and the escalation to physical and emotional abuse. Throughout, Ethan remained composed, one hand resting on Bear's head, occasionally glancing at Sophia or Dr. Franklin for reassurance. It was when they reached the subject of the photographs that Ethan's composure first wavered. "Ethan," Torres said carefully, "you told Detective Rivera that Mr. Hoffman took pictures of you. Can you tell the court about that?" Ethan's breathing quickened visibly. His hand tightened in Bear's fur, and the dog responded by pressing closer to him. "He said it was for his special project," Ethan said after a moment. "At first, they were just normal pictures, but then he wanted different ones." "Different how?" Ethan looked directly at Dr. Franklin, who nodded encouragingly. "Without my shirt or in just my underwear," he said. "He said all real models have to do that." Sophia clenched her fists in her lap, focusing on Ethan's strength rather than the rage that threatened to overwhelm her. Beside her, Camila's breathing was deliberately measured, the military technique for managing intense emotion visible in the controlled rise and fall of her chest. "Did you want to take those pictures?" Torres asked. "No, but he said if I didn't, he'd hurt my mom." Ethan's voice cracked slightly, and he showed me pictures of other kids who did what he said. He said they were his special friends, and if I was good, I could meet them someday. Torres approached the evidence table, lifting a folder. "Ethan, I'm going to show you some photographs. These are not the ones Mr. Hoffman took of you. Those will never be shown in court. These are drawings that were found in Mr. Hoffman's apartment. I want to know if you recognize them." The drawings were color copies of sketches found in the hidden room, childlike illustrations similar to what Ethan produced in therapy but with darker themes. Images of houses with barred windows, men with cameras, children with tears. Ethan studied each one carefully, then pointed to one showing a house with a distinctive red door. "I saw this one. Mr. Hoffman had it on his refrigerator. He said it was where his special friends lived sometimes." "Did he ever take you to this house?" No. He said I wasn't ready yet. Ethan's voice dropped. But the red-haired man wanted to take me there. They argued about it. A murmur ran through the courtroom. This was new information, not included in Ethan's previous statements or therapy disclosures. Sophia exchanged a glance with Detective Rivera, whose intense focus on Ethan had sharpened. The red-haired man, Torres repeated carefully. Was this someone who visited Mr. Hoffman's apartment? Yes, twice. Ethan's hand moved rhythmically through Bear's fur, the motion seemingly calming him. He talked funny, not like here, and Mr. Hoffman was different when he was there, more nervous, like when the principal comes to your classroom. What did they talk about when this man visited? Ethan frowned in concentration. Money sometimes, and the special project and other kids. If they were ready. Ready for what? To go to the house with the red door. Ethan looked directly at Torres for the first time. I think it was a bad place. The kids in the pictures from there looked really scared. Sophia felt a chill despite the courtroom's warmth. Ethan had never mentioned seeing photographs of children at another location. Had he been shielding himself from the memory, or had he been protecting her from knowing the full extent of what he had witnessed? Torres moved carefully through a few more questions before addressing the hidden room directly. Ethan, you drew a picture for Dr. Franklin showing a secret room in Mr. Hoffman's apartment. Can you tell the court about that room? It was behind his bookshelf, Ethan said, more confident now. You had to pull the mythology book to open it. He took me in there 3 times. What was in the room? Cameras, lights, a bed with no blankets, and computers, 3 of them. He let me play games on one once, but the other ones he said were just for grown-ups. Did you ever see what was on those other computers? Ethan hesitated, looking at Sophia with an expression that asked for permission or perhaps forgiveness. She nodded slightly, trying to convey that nothing he said could change her love for him. Once, he admitted, when he went to answer the door, there were folders with kids' names and pictures. His voice faltered. Bad pictures of kids with the red-haired man and other grown-ups. Torres approached the bench, speaking softly to the judge. After a brief conference, the judge addressed Ethan directly. I think this is a good time for a break, she said kindly. Ethan, you've been very brave and have helped us understand a lot. Would you like some water or a snack? Ethan nodded, visibly relieved. Can my mom come with me? Of course. As Sophia led Ethan from the courtroom, her arm protectively around his shoulders, she was acutely aware of Hoffman's gaze following them. For the first time since his arrest, she allowed herself to look directly at him, the man who had hunted her son, who had been grooming him for unimaginable horrors beyond what he had already inflicted. Hoffman's eyes, once grandfatherly behind wire-rimmed glasses, now revealed what Sophia had failed to see before. A coldness, a calculation. He met her gaze without flinching, without shame, and in that moment, Sophia understood with perfect clarity that this was not a man who could be rehabilitated. This was predation in its purest form, dressed in cardigans and kindly smiles. In the small conference room, Ethan collapsed into Camila's waiting arms, while Sophia poured him water with trembling hands. Dr. Franklin joined them, her professional composure intact but concern evident in her eyes. He's doing remarkably well, she told Sophia quietly. But that disclosure about seeing images of children at the house with the red door, that's significant. The defense will likely challenge it, Sophia said bitterly. They'll say he's making it up. They'll try. But Ethan's description matches details from files recovered from Hoffman's computers. Details that weren't public and that Ethan couldn't have known unless he saw them himself. Ethan pulled away from Camila, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Did I do okay? He asked, looking between the 3 adults. You did amazing, buddy, Camila assured him. Her usual military stoicism softened by genuine emotion. I've seen soldiers with less courage than you just showed in there. The hard part is almost over, Sophia added, kneeling before him. The defense attorney is going to ask you questions next. Remember what we practiced. Ethan nodded solemnly. She might try to confuse me or make it sound like I'm remembering wrong. I just have to tell the truth and say if I don't know something. Exactly. And if you need another break or if it gets too hard, you'll tell the judge, Ethan finished. I know, Mom. He reached for her hand, his small fingers interlacing with hers. I can finish this. For the other kids. Sophia fought back tears, overwhelmed by her son's resilience in the face of trauma that would have shattered many adults. Okay, she said softly. Then let's finish it. The defense attorney's cross-examination was clinical and methodical, a stark contrast to Torres's empathetic questioning. Hoffman's lawyer, a sharp-featured woman named Elaine Ross, approached Ethan with professional detachment. Ethan, she began, you've told the court about spending time with Mr. Hoffman while your mother was at work. How often were you alone with him? Almost every day after school, Ethan replied cautiously. And sometimes on weekends when Mom had to visit Grandma. And during all those hours, did you ever tell your mother that Mr. Hoffman was hurting you? No. Did you tell any of your teachers or the school counselor? No. Why not, if Mr. Hoffman was hurting you as you've described? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. Because he said he'd hurt my mom if I told. And I believed him. If Ross was thrown by the directness of the response, she didn't show it. You mentioned seeing photographs on Mr. Hoffman's computer of children at a house with a red door. When exactly did you see these? The second time the red-haired man came over. Mr. Hoffman went to get drinks, and I looked at the computer. And you're certain these were photographs, not drawings like the ones shown earlier? They were real pictures, like from a camera. Ross consulted her notes. Yet, in your initial interviews with Detective Rivera and in your therapy sessions with Dr. Franklin, you never mentioned these photographs. Why is that? Ethan glanced at Dr. Franklin before answering. I was scared to remember it, and I didn't want to get in trouble for looking at Mr. Hoffman's computer when he told me not to. Sophia watched Ross carefully, seeing the slight recalibration in her approach. Ethan's straightforward answers were not providing the openings she had clearly hoped for. Ethan, Ross continued, you've stated that Mr. Hoffman threatened to hurt your mother if you told anyone about what was happening. Yet according to your mother's work records, she's a trained emergency room nurse who regularly handles crisis situations. Did it seem plausible to you that Mr. Hoffman could actually harm her? Before Ethan could answer, Torres was on his feet. Objection. Calls for speculation and asks the witness to assess the reasonableness of threats made during a traumatic experience. Sustained, the judge ruled. Ms. Ross, please rephrase or move on. Ross paused, then took a different approach. Ethan, you mentioned a red-haired man who visited Mr. Hoffman's apartment. Had you ever seen this man before those visits? No. And you're certain he had red hair, not brown or blonde? It was red, Ethan said firmly. Bright red like a fire truck. And he had a scar here. He pointed to his left eyebrow. Sophia saw Rivera lean forward intently. This detail about a scar had not been mentioned before either, yet it matched the description of Anton Klov in Interpol's files. Ross pressed on for nearly an hour, attempting to find inconsistencies in Ethan's testimony. Throughout, Ethan remained remarkably composed, answering directly, admitting when he couldn't remember details, but never wavering on the core facts of his experience. When Ross finally concluded, the judge gave Torres the opportunity for redirect questioning. Just one question, Your Honor, Torres said, approaching the witness stand. Ethan, after everything you've told us today, is there anything else you want the court to know about what happened? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his hand steady on Bear's head. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the hushed courtroom. Mr. Hoffman told me that no one would believe me if I told, that grown-ups always believe other grown-ups more than kids. He looked directly at the judge. I just want you to know that I'm telling the truth about everything. Even the scary parts one didn't want to remember. The judge's expression softened momentarily. Thank you, Ethan. You may step down now. As Ethan returned to Sophia's side, the courtroom remained silent, the weight of his testimony hanging in the air. Even Hoffman's stoic demeanor had cracked slightly, a flicker of unease crossing his face as he whispered urgently to his attorney. The judge called a 15-minute recess before closing arguments. In the hallway outside, Sophia held Ethan close, feeling his body finally relax as the tension of testimony released its hold. "You did it," she whispered against his hair. "It's over now." But it wasn't over. Not really. The preliminary hearing was just the beginning. If the judge found sufficient evidence, and after Ethan's testimony, there seemed little doubt she would, a trial date would be set. Months more of preparation, of therapy, of waiting. Yet something fundamental had shifted. Today, Ethan had faced his abuser and spoken his truth despite Hoffman's threats and manipulations. He had reclaimed his voice, his agency, his power. Detective Rivera approached them, professional restraint not quite masking her admiration. "That was remarkable," she said to Ethan, "especially the detail about the scar. It helps us confirm without doubt that the man you saw was Anton Klov." "Is that his name?" Ethan asked. "The red-haired man?" Rivera nodded. "Yes, and thanks to your testimony, we now have evidence linking him directly to Hoffman. That's going to help a lot with the international investigation." "Will you find the other kids?" Ethan's question was direct, uncomplicated by the political and jurisdictional complexities that Rivera navigated daily. "The ones in the pictures? We're doing everything we can," Rivera promised. "And your bravery today has given us new tools to help them." As they returned to the courtroom for closing arguments, Sophia noticed movement near the back entrance. Two children, a boy about Ethan's age and a slightly younger girl, entered with their parents. The boy's eyes met Ethan's briefly, a flash of recognition passing between them. "Mom," Ethan whispered, tugging at Sophia's sleeve. "That's Lucas, Mrs. Gonzalez's son. He was in some of the pictures on Mr. Hoffman's computer." Sophia's heart sank. Another child from their building. Another family shattered by Hoffman's predation. But there was something else in Ethan's expression as he looked at Lucas. Not just recognition, but connection. The shared understanding that only another survivor could truly comprehend. The closing arguments proceeded as expected, Torres outlining the overwhelming evidence against Hoffman, Ross arguing that much of it was circumstantial and that Ethan's testimony contained inconsistencies. But the energy in the courtroom had shifted. The presence of not one, but two of Hoffman's victims seemed to solidify the reality of his crimes in a way that even photographic evidence could not. When the judge rendered her decision, it was swift and unequivocal. "The court finds sufficient evidence to bind the defendant over for trial on all counts," she declared. "Bail is denied due to the severity of the charges and the demonstrated flight risk. Trial is set for April 15th. As Hoffman was led away in handcuffs, his gaze fell on Ethan one last time. Sophia instinctively moved to shield her son, but Ethan stood his ground, looking directly at his abuser without flinching. In that moment, something passed between them, the final severing of the psychological control Hoffman had maintained even from behind bars. Ethan's testimony had broken not just the case open, but the chains of fear that had bound him for so long. Outside the courthouse, a light snow had begun to fall, dusting the steps with white. Ethan tilted his face up to catch a snowflake on his tongue. The simple, childlike gesture, so normal, so precious, brought tears to Sophia's eyes, and she had to turn away to hide them. Camila's arm came around her shoulders. "He's going to be okay," she said softly. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually." Sophia nodded, watching as Ethan carefully formed a small snowball in his gloved hands. "I know, but will I? How do I ever trust anyone with him again? How do I let him out of my sight?" "The same way he found the courage to testify," Camila replied. "One day at a time with help." She squeezed Sophia's shoulder. "Speaking of which, I've put in for a transfer to the Boston recruitment office. If it comes through, I can stay another year at least." Sophia turned to her sister in surprise. "Cam, your career can wait," Camila finished firmly. "Some things are more important. Family is more important." Before Sophia could respond, Ethan approached, his cheeks flushed with cold, snowflakes melting in his hair. He held out the small, perfectly round snowball he had formed. "Can we go to the park?" he asked, a hint of the child he had been, the child he might yet be again in his voice. Just for a little while? Sophia looked at her son, at the shadows still visible in his eyes, but also at the light that had begun to return, at the courage that had allowed him to speak his truth, at the resilience that might, with time and love and support, allow him to reclaim his childhood. "Yes," she said, taking his free hand in hers. "Let's go to the park." As they descended the courthouse steps, Sophia noticed Mrs. Gonzalez and her family nearby. Ethan saw them too, and after a moment's hesitation, approached Lucas with determined steps. The two boys regarded each other silently, a world of shared experience passing between them without words. Then, with the simple logic of children, Ethan held out his snowball. Lucas accepted it, a small smile breaking through his serious expression. No words were exchanged. None were needed. In that moment, two children who had seen the darkest aspects of humanity found common ground in the simple joy of snow on a winter day. Sophia watched, her heart both breaking and healing as Ethan and Lucas began gathering more snow, their movements gradually becoming less cautious, more playful. Two mothers stood witness, their eyes meeting in silent understanding across the courthouse plaza. Two families forever changed, yet somehow improbably finding a path forward. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be the trial, the media attention, the continued therapy, the long process of rebuilding trust and safety. But watching Ethan laugh, actually laugh, as a snowball disintegrated harmlessly against his jacket, Sophia allowed herself to believe in possibilities that had seemed unimaginable just hours before. Her son had found his voice, and in doing so, he had shown her how to find hers as well. Not just as his protector, but as his guide on the long road toward healing. That night, after Ethan had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day but also perhaps unburdened by it, Sophia sat at the kitchen table with Camila, nursing a cup of tea gone cold. "I've been thinking about work," Sophia said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "About my schedule at the hospital." Camila looked up from her laptop, where she'd been researching transfer opportunities. "What about it? I can't go back to those shifts, 60, 70 hours a week, nights, weekends, holidays." Sophia traced the rim of her mug with her finger. "That's what led to all of this, my absence." "Soph," Camila began, her tone sharp with warning. "No, I know what you're going to say. That it's not my fault, that Hoffman is the only one to blame." Sophia met her sister's gaze directly. "And logically, I know that's true, but the reality is Ethan needed me, and I wasn't there." Camila sighed, closing her laptop. "So what are you thinking?" "Dr. Kapoor at the Community Health Center reached out last week. They need a nurse practitioner for their pediatric clinic. Regular hours, Monday through Friday. The pay is less, significantly less, but Ethan would have his mother home every night." "But we'd have to downsize," Camila finished. Sophia nodded, the decision crystallizing as she spoke it aloud. "We'd have to move to a smaller apartment further from the city. But after everything that's happened, I don't think either of us wants to stay in that building anyway." "Have you talked to Ethan about moving?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure it was the right decision first." Sophia's gaze drifted to the refrigerator, where Ethan's most recent drawing, the family portrait from therapy, was proudly displayed. "After today, I'm sure. He needs stability, routine, presence. I can give him that at the clinic in a way I never could at the ER." Camila reached across the table, covering Sophia's hand with her own. "For what it's worth, I think it's the right call. Not because you're to blame, you're not, but because this is what healing looks like. Recognizing what you both need and making changes to support that." "It feels like starting over," Sophia admitted. "Like everything I worked for, my career, our home, is being washed away." "Not washed away," Camila corrected gently. "Transformed, like Ethan. Like you." She squeezed Sophia's hand. "The Martinez women don't wash away, sis. We rebuild." Sophia smiled faintly, the first genuine smile in what felt like months. "The Martinez women and one very brave Martinez boy." The apartment fell silent again, the distant sound of traffic a reminder of the world continuing beyond their walls. A world that Ethan would eventually need to rejoin, step by careful step. The trial loomed ahead with all its uncertainty and potential for further trauma. But something had shifted fundamentally today. A corner had been turned. Thank you so much for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. When a dedicated summer camp counselor notices a usually cheerful 8-year-old boy dissolve into tears and panic at pickup time, her professional concern transforms into horrified suspicion. What begins as a routine child welfare check will quickly spiral into a race against time to save not just one child, but potentially others from a darkness hiding behind a respected community leader's perfect facade. Her decision to probe deeper might destroy her career and reputation if she's wrong. But the broken look in that little boy's eyes tells her the risk is worth taking, no matter the cost. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe in speaking up for children who can't defend themselves, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Morgan Riley had spent 5 summers as a counselor at Camp Pinewood, working her way through college by helping children create crafts, learn swimming skills, and build confidence in outdoor activities. At 24, with her child psychology degree nearly completed, she viewed each summer not just as income but as practical experience for her future career. The camp, nestled among towering pine trees just outside the small town of Lakeside, served children from both affluent families in the nearby suburbs and scholarship kids from the town itself. She'd grown up in Lakeside herself, the daughter of a high school teacher and a nurse, and had attended Camp Pinewood for 6 summers as a child. Those experiences had shaped her, transforming a shy, bookish girl into someone with enough confidence to later mentor others. Morgan still remembered the counselor who had taken extra time with her when she'd been too afraid to jump off the diving platform. A patient young woman named Tara who had sat with her for almost an hour, talking through her fears until Morgan finally found the courage to make the leap. That moment of triumph had sparked something in her, a desire to provide that same transformative support to other children. Her small apartment in town was filled with mementos from her summers at camp, friendship bracelets from campers, painted rocks gifted by artistic children, and dozens of group photos showing circles of smiling faces. Each item represented not just memories but milestones in her development as a youth mentor. Her psychology professors often commented on how seamlessly she integrated theoretical concepts with practical experience, a skill that Morgan attributed entirely to her time at Camp Pinewood. This final week of the summer session had been particularly rewarding. Morgan supervised the Otter group, 12 children aged 7 to 9, and had watched them transform from nervous strangers into confident friends who navigated ropes courses, learned basic archery, and mastered swimming skills they'd lacked just weeks earlier. As the summer drew to a close, Morgan felt the familiar bittersweet satisfaction of having made a difference, knowing these children would take home more than just arts and crafts projects. Camp Pinewood's last day traditions included a morning farewell ceremony where each group performed a song or skit they prepared, followed by a special lunch featuring each child's favorite foods as noted on their registration forms. The afternoon brought a final swim in the lake and time for packing and exchanging contact information. Parents began arriving at 3 o'clock, greeted in the main parking area by counselors who radioed to the various activity zones that specific children should gather their belongings and head to the pickup point. Morgan had decorated the Otter's cabin with photographs from their adventures. Candid shots of wide-eyed triumph on the climbing wall, concentrated focus during archery lessons, and unrestrained joy during water fights. She'd prepared individual folders containing each child's artwork, achievement certificates, and a personalized note highlighting their unique contributions to the group. These thoughtful touches were what parents had come to expect from Camp Pinewood, but for Morgan, they represented a genuine effort to honor each child's journey. Among her charges, 8-year-old Ethan Winters had been a standout, not for athletic ability or academic aptitude, but for his infectious enthusiasm and kindness toward other campers. Thin and wiry, with a mop of brown hair perpetually falling into his eyes, Ethan had arrived on the first day clutching his backpack straps with white-knuckled fingers, noticeably hesitant to join group activities. By the second week, however, he had blossomed, eagerly volunteering for tasks and showing particular talent in creative storytelling activities. At the campfire each night, when counselors invited campers to share stories, Ethan's hand would shoot up, his face alight with excitement. His tales featured brave explorers discovering magical forests or befriending fantastical creatures who helped them overcome obstacles. Morgan had noted in her counselor log how Ethan's stories always emphasized themes of protection and rescue. Heroes saving younger children from dark forests or deep caves, finding them safe places where they could finally sleep peacefully. In retrospect, the recurring themes would take on a heartbreaking significance. During swimming lessons, Ethan had shown admirable persistence despite his initial fear of deep water. Morgan had worked with him during free swim periods, patiently helping him build confidence until he could dog paddle across the shallow end unassisted. His triumphant smile when he first accomplished this feat, a mixture of pride and disbelief in his own capabilities, was exactly the kind of moment that made Morgan love her job. She'd captured the achievement in a photograph now included in his end-of-camp portfolio. Morgan had noted this transformation with professional satisfaction. Children often took time to adjust to new environments, and Ethan's evolution from anxious observer to enthusiastic participant represented exactly the growth Camp Pinewood aimed to inspire. She'd mentioned his progress specifically during her weekly reports to the camp director, Alexander Donovan, who in turn shared such observations with parents during check-in calls. Alex had been particularly pleased with Morgan's report on Ethan. His mother called twice this week to check on him, she'd told Morgan during their Thursday staff meeting. She seemed surprised to hear he was doing so well. Apparently, he's been struggling socially at school. She was worried camp might be too overwhelming. He was definitely withdrawn that first week, Morgan had replied. But something clicked during the treasure hunt activity. He figured out one of the clues when no one else could, and you could literally see his confidence grow after the other kids celebrated his cleverness. On this Friday afternoon, as parents began arriving for the final pickup of the summer session, Morgan gathered her otters to distribute certificates and say goodbyes. The pavilion buzzed with the energy of children exchanging contact information and promises to meet again next summer. Ethan sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, carefully placing his certificates and art projects into his backpack, a small smile playing across his freckled face. The weather had cooperated beautifully. Clear blue skies, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine and sunscreen, and temperatures warm enough for comfort without the oppressive humidity that had plagued the previous week. Sunlight streamed through the pavilion's open sides, casting golden rectangles across the wooden floor where the children clustered in small groups. The familiar sounds of the camp, the distant splash of swimmers in the lake, wind rustling through pine boughs, and the hollow knocking of the flag rope against its metal pole, created a peaceful backdrop for the farewells. Morgan moved among her campers, kneeling briefly beside each child to offer personal goodbyes and remind them of specific accomplishments she'd observed. When she reached Ethan, he was meticulously arranging his portfolio so the edges aligned perfectly with his backpack, a level of care that seemed at odds with the typical haphazard packing of an 8-year-old boy. "Excited to show your parents everything you've made?" Morgan asked, kneeling beside him. Ethan nodded, though his smile faltered slightly. "Yeah, my mom will like the clay pot I made her." "And what about your dad? I bet he'll love that comic book you created." The boy's hands stilled over his backpack. "Maybe," he said quietly. Morgan noted the shift in his demeanor, the slight stiffening of his shoulders, the way his eyes focused intently on his packing rather than meeting her gaze. She'd learned to read children's body language through both her psychology studies and practical experience, recognizing that such subtle cues often communicated what children couldn't or wouldn't verbalize. Before she could probe further, the counselor assigned to greeting parents at the parking lot approached with a clipboard. "First wave of parents is here," she announced, her voice carrying over the children's chatter. "I've got pickup authorizations for Harrison, Mendelson, Kim, Winters, and Blair." The reaction was immediate and disturbing. Ethan's face drained of color, the light freckles across his nose and cheeks standing out in stark relief against suddenly pale skin. His breathing quickened, becoming shallow and rapid, and his hands began to tremble visibly as he fumbled with his backpack zipper. When Morgan touched his shoulder gently, She found his muscles rigid with tension, as if bracing for impact. "Ethan, your parents are here. Time to—" Before she could finish, the boy's face crumpled, tears spilling down his cheeks as his breathing escalated into panicked gasps. The transformation was so sudden and severe that several nearby children stopped their chatter to stare, their expressions shifting from excitement to confusion and concern. One girl, Maddie, who had become particularly close with Ethan during the session, took a hesitant step toward him before Morgan gently shook her head, silently indicating she would handle the situation. "I don't want to go," Ethan whispered, the words barely audible through his sobs. His chest heaved with the effort of drawing breath between gasps. "Please, can I stay? Just one more night? Please." The raw desperation in his voice cut through Morgan's professional detachment. This wasn't the typical sadness of a child reluctant to leave the fun of camp behind. This was fear, visceral and immediate. Morgan had witnessed end-of-camp tears before, children reluctant to leave friends or the freedom of outdoor activities. But this was different. The naked fear in Ethan's eyes triggered every professional alarm bell she possessed. His reaction wasn't merely sadness at summer's end. It carried the unmistakable weight of dread. "Hey, it's okay," she soothed, keeping her voice low and calm despite the concern racing through her mind. She gently guided him away from the other children, creating a small pocket of privacy within the busy pavilion. "Let's take a minute to talk before you go." She nodded to her co-counselor Jake to supervise the others, while she led Ethan to a quiet corner of the pavilion. Jake, a college junior studying elementary education, instantly recognized the seriousness of the situation from Morgan's expression. He smoothly redirected the other children's attention, organizing an impromptu game of cat's cradle with string they'd used earlier for friendship bracelets. "Who remembers how to make the witch's broom?" he asked, effectively drawing curious eyes away from Ethan's distress. Once seated on a bench partially screened by stacked canoes, Morgan crouched to meet Ethan's eyes, deliberately positioning herself at his level rather than standing over him. The corner smelled of cedar and lake water, the canoes still damp from their final use that morning. A life jacket hung from a nearby hook, gently swaying in the breeze that filtered through the pavilion's open sides. "Can you tell me what's making you so upset about going home?" Morgan asked gently, keeping her tone conversational rather than interrogative. The boy wiped his nose with his sleeve, his shoulders still heaving with suppressed sobs. His breathing had begun to regulate, though hiccups occasionally interrupted his attempts to compose himself. I like it better here," he managed finally, staring at the wooden floor. "I'm glad you enjoyed camp," Morgan said carefully, watching his face for reactions. "But your parents must be excited to see you after 3 weeks away." Ethan's expression flickered at the mention of parents, a momentary tightening around his eyes. He focused intently on his sneakers, scuffed from 3 weeks of outdoor play. "My mom is," he said quietly, emphasis subtle but unmistakable. The deliberate omission hung heavy in the air between them, like the weighted silence before a thunderstorm. Morgan chose her next words with precision, aware of both the seriousness of what she suspected and the risk of guiding a child toward false accusations. Her psychology training had emphasized the importance of open-ended questions that encouraged disclosure without suggestion. "Ethan, is there something about going home that's making you scared?" The boy's fingers twisted in the hem of his t-shirt, a nervous gesture she'd noticed during his first few days at camp, but which had gradually disappeared as he grew more comfortable. Now it returned with intensity, his small fingers working the fabric until it wrinkled. "I told him I wouldn't tell," he whispered after a long pause, his voice so soft Morgan had to lean closer to hear. "He said I'd get in big trouble, that nobody would believe me anyway because of who he is." A chill ran through Morgan that had nothing to do with the shade of the pavilion. The hairs on her arms rose as warning signals flashed in her mind. These were textbook phrases, the language of a child who had been systematically silenced by an abuser. "Who told you that, Ethan?" she asked, working to keep her voice steady despite the alarm spreading through her. His voice dropped even lower, his eyes darting around as if checking for eavesdroppers despite their relative privacy. My stepdad. My real dad left when I was little. Morgan nodded encouragingly, resisting the urge to fill the silence as Ethan gathered his courage. The sounds of the camp seemed to fade into the background as she focused entirely on the small boy before her, creating a space where he might feel safe enough to share what was clearly a closely guarded secret. And what did your stepdad tell you not to tell? Ethan's breath hitched, a small, pained sound escaping before he could suppress it. About the basement, he whispered, the words emerging reluctantly. About what happens when I make him mad. His small hand moved to his forearm, fingers hovering over the sleeve of his camp t-shirt. After a moment's hesitation, he tugged at the fabric, slowly rolling it up to reveal a pattern of fading bruises encircling his forearm. Finger marks, unmistakably adult-sized, yellowing at the edges but still clearly visible against his summer-tanned skin. Morgan fought to keep her expression neutral despite the rage and horror building inside her. Years of training helped her maintain a composed exterior while her mind processed the implications of what she was seeing. The bruises were unmistakable, the clear imprint of an adult hand gripping with excessive force, the spacing of the finger marks suggesting a large male hand. Ethan, has your stepdad hurt you other times? Not just on your arm? Her voice remained gentle but direct, knowing that clarity was essential now that the disclosure had begun. A small nod, his eyes still fixed downward. When Mom's at work, she has night shifts at the hospital. He says it's discipline, but his voice cracked, a hint of confusion underlying the fear. Mom doesn't discipline like that. Does your mom know about how he disciplines you? Ethan shook his head, brown hair falling across his forehead with the movement. He says she won't believe me, that she'll think I'm making it up because I don't like him, and that it would break her heart. The boy's shoulders hunched inward, as if trying to make himself smaller. He says she needs him because she gets sad sometimes, and I shouldn't make trouble. Morgan's mind raced, analyzing both what Ethan was saying and what she knew of family dynamics in abusive households. The stepfather was clearly using multiple tactics: physical intimidation, emotional manipulation, and exploiting the mother's vulnerability to maintain control and ensure silence. As a mandated reporter, her legal obligation was clear. This disclosure required immediate action, but the pickup process complicated matters. Ethan's parents, or rather, his mother and stepfather, were already waiting. Any delay would raise questions, potentially alerting the abuser. Ethan, listen to me, Morgan said, keeping her voice calm despite the urgency pulsing through her. She gently placed her hand on the bench beside him, close enough to offer support without forcing physical contact that might feel threatening after his disclosure. What you've told me is very brave, and I want you to know that I believe you. What your stepdad is doing is wrong, and it's not your fault. The boy's eyes widened slightly, as if the concept of being believed was foreign to him. But he's the police chief, Ethan whispered, fresh tears welling in his eyes. That's why he says nobody will believe me. The revelation hit Morgan like physical blow, momentarily stealing her breath. Richard Hayes, Ethan's stepfather, was indeed Lakeside's police chief, a decorated officer often featured in local news for community outreach initiatives. Just last month, the Lakeside Gazette had run a front-page story about his new juvenile intervention program, complete with a photo of Hayes speaking to elementary school children about safety. The man's position complicated the situation exponentially, adding layers of political and procedural complexity to an already delicate child protection case. I believe you, Morgan repeated firmly, putting extra emphasis on the words. And there are others who will believe you too. People whose job it is to keep children safe, even from adults with important jobs. She maintained eye contact, wanting to ensure Ethan understood the seriousness of her commitment. Here's what we're going to do. First, I need to talk to my boss, Ms. Donovan. Then we're going to make sure you're safe. But he's already here, Ethan said, panic rising in his voice again, his breathing quickening. In the parking lot. With Mom. You won't be going with him today, Morgan promised, though she wasn't entirely sure how she would ensure that. The logistics would be complex, requiring immediate coordination with multiple agencies. Can you wait here with Counselor Jake for a few minutes while I talk to Ms. Donovan? After Ethan nodded, Morgan quickly briefed Jake, using coded language they'd established for sensitive situations. Yellow flag with Ethan, she murmured, referring to their system for potential abuse cases. Need to speak with Alex immediately. Keep him engaged and away from the pickup area. Jake's expression remained casual for Ethan's benefit, though his eyes reflected understanding of the seriousness. No problem. Hey Ethan, want to help me organize the nature specimens for next week's campers? I could use an expert sorter. As Ethan tentatively moved to help Jake with the collection of pine cones, interesting rocks, and pressed leaves they used for craft projects, Morgan hurried toward the administrative cabin, her mind already formulating a plan. Her pace quickened as she moved along the pine needle-covered path, the familiar route now charged with urgency. But nothing could prepare Morgan for how the next hours would unfold, or for the web of protection that had allowed abuse to continue under the cover of authority and respectability. Alexandra Donovan, Camp Pinewood's director for over 15 years, listened to Morgan's report with growing concern. At 56, with silver-streaked dark hair and the weathered complexion of someone who spent most of her life outdoors, Alex had encountered serious child welfare issues before. Her response was immediate and decisive. I'll call County Child Protective Services now. Since Chief Hayes is involved, we'll need to contact the state police rather than local law enforcement. She reached for the phone on her desk, already flipping through the emergency contact binder kept updated with relevant numbers for precisely these situations. Meanwhile, we need to create a buffer situation so he doesn't suspect anything when the pickup doesn't proceed normally. Morgan nodded, relieved at Alex's unhesitating support. In the 4 summers she'd worked at Camp Pinewood, she'd seen firsthand how seriously Alex took child safety, from rigorous background checks on staff to comprehensive training on recognizing abuse indicators. The camp director had previously worked as a school counselor and brought that professional expertise to her role, establishing clear protocols for handling suspected abuse or neglect. What's our buffer plan? Morgan asked, already considering and discarding various options in her mind. Medical hold, Alex replied, already dialing. We'll say Ethan showed symptoms we need to monitor for a few hours before release. Fever, stomach distress, whatever. Dr. Patel is still on premises for closing day checkouts. He can make the official recommendation. While Alex spoke with CPS, Morgan stepped outside to call Dr. Patel, the camp's consulting physician who visited weekly and remained on-site during arrival and departure days. A gentle man in his early 60s with a specialization in pediatrics, Dr. Patel had worked with Camp Pinewood for nearly a decade. She explained the situation in clinical terms, relieved when the doctor immediately grasped both the medical pretense needed and the actual emergency at hand. I'll document everything I observe, he assured her, and I'll ensure the medical record supports whatever actions become necessary to protect the child. Minutes later, armed with a viable delay strategy, Morgan returned to the pavilion where Jake had engaged Ethan in a card game, effectively normalizing the situation. The boy's tears had subsided, though his posture remained tense, his eyes darting toward the parking lot path whenever voices approached. Ethan, Morgan said gently, approaching with a deliberately casual demeanor. Dr. Patel needs to check something in the medical cabin. Can you come with me? As they walked the short trail to the cabin, Morgan explained in age-appropriate terms what would happen next. Your mom and stepdad will be told you're showing signs of a possible virus, and that Dr. Patel wants to monitor you for a few hours before releasing you. But then I'll still have to go with him, Ethan said, his voice small, tension evident in every line of his body. No, Morgan assured him, choosing her words carefully to balance honesty with appropriate reassurance. While Dr. Patel is examining you, some people from Child Protective Services will be arriving. They're specially trained to help kids in situations like yours. They'll talk with you, and then they'll make arrangements to keep you safe. What about Mom? She didn't do anything wrong. The concern in his voice for his mother, even amid his own distress, struck Morgan as particularly poignant. Morgan squeezed his shoulder gently. They'll talk to your mom too. The most important thing is making sure you're both safe. At the medical cabin, Dr. Patel greeted them warmly, his calm demeanor helping to settle Ethan's nerves. The small building smelled of antiseptic and pine, its rustic exterior belying the well-equipped examination space inside. While the doctor conducted a general examination, documenting the bruises and asking gentle questions about their origin, Morgan stepped outside to observe the parking lot situation. Through the trees, she could see Alex speaking with a couple next to a silver SUV, presumably Ethan's mother and stepfather. The woman looked concerned, nodding as Alex presumably explained the medical situation. She was slender, with the same brown hair as Ethan, though hers was pulled back in a neat ponytail. The man, tall and broad-shouldered in a polo shirt and khakis, had his arms crossed over his chest, his stance radiating impatience rather than parental concern. Even from a distance, Morgan could read the power dynamics in their body language. The woman, Jessica Winters, according to Ethan's registration forms, kept glancing at her husband as if seeking cues on how to respond. Chief Hayes, meanwhile, seemed more irritated by the delay than worried about his stepson. Morgan's phone vibrated with a text from Alex. CPS ETA 30 minutes. State police notified. En route. Buffer holding. 20 tense minutes later, Morgan sat with Ethan in the medical cabin's small lounge area, playing a board game to distract him while Dr. Patel updated his notes. The boy's initial relief at not being immediately sent home had evolved into quieter anxiety about what would happen next. His fingers tapped nervously on the game board as he moved his piece, his eyes frequently darting to the window. "What if they don't believe me?" he asked suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's good at making people believe him. That's his job." Morgan considered her response carefully, wanting to be honest without increasing his anxiety. The people coming to help are trained to listen to children and recognize when adults aren't telling the truth. And you have something very important on your side. Ethan. What's that? Evidence, she said simply. Those bruises. And I bet there are other marks too. Older ones that haven't completely healed. Ethan nodded slowly. On my back. And my legs. Those tell a story that matches what you're saying. That's powerful evidence that even a police chief can't talk his way around. A gentle knock at the door preceded Alex entering with a woman who introduced herself as Vanessa Chun from Child Protective Services and Detective Michael Okonkwo from the state police. Ethan, Alex said, these people need to talk with you for a little while. Morgan can stay if you'd like. The boy nodded, reaching automatically for Morgan's hand as the adults settled into chairs around the small room. Ms. Chun led the interview with practiced skill, asking non-leading questions and giving Ethan time to respond at his own pace. Detective Okonkwo mostly observed, occasionally requesting clarification but maintaining a gentle, unthreatening demeanor despite his imposing height. Ethan's disclosures emerged gradually, a pattern of escalating physical punishment that began shortly after his mother married Richard Hayes 2 years earlier. Initial discipline, involving excessive physical exertion like holding stress positions or doing push-ups until exhaustion had evolved into direct physical abuse. Belt whippings, grabbing and shaking, and being locked in the basement storage room for hours. He says it makes me tough, Ethan explained, staring at his hands. That I'm too soft like my real dad. That mom babied me too much before he came. Does your mom know about this? Miss Chun asked. I tried to tell her once, Ethan said. But he was there, and he gave me this look, and I got scared and said I was just joking. His voice dropped. He hurt me worse that night. Where is your mom when these things happen? Detective Okonkwo asked. Usually at work. She's a nurse at Lakeside Memorial. She works a lot of night shifts. As the interview continued, Morgan felt increasing certainty that they'd made the right call. Each revelation built a clearer picture of systematic abuse by a man who used his position of authority to ensure silence and compliance. What troubled her most was how narrowly they'd caught it. Without the emotional breakdown at pickup time, Ethan might have continued suffering in silence. How many other children lived similar nightmares? Their distress signals missed or misinterpreted. After nearly an hour, Ms. Chun and Detective Okonkwo stepped outside to consult, leaving Morgan with Ethan. "Did I do okay?" the boy asked anxiously. "You did amazing," Morgan assured him. "You're one of the bravest people I've ever met." When the officials returned, their expressions were grimly determined. "We have enough to act immediately," Detective Okonkwo said. "Ms. Chun will initiate an emergency removal order while I coordinate with the state police captain about approaching Chief Hayes." "What about Ethan's mother?" Morgan asked. "We'll interview her separately," Ms. Chun explained. "Based on what Ethan has told us, she may be a secondary victim rather than complicit. There are significant indications of coercive control in their household dynamic." Alex, who had been managing the increasingly complex logistics of Camp Closure Day while this crisis unfolded, entered with an update. "Chief Hayes is becoming agitated. He's demanding to see Ethan immediately and threatening to bring in officers if we don't comply." Detective Okonkwo's expression hardened. "That won't be happening. I'll handle him directly." He turned to Ms. Chun. "Get the emergency placement arranged. I'll need a state police unit for backup, given the circumstances." As the adults mobilized, Morgan remained with Ethan, trying to shield him from the tension while honestly preparing him for what would come next. "You won't be going home with your stepdad today," she explained. "Ms. Chun is arranging for you to stay somewhere safe while everything gets sorted out." "What about Mom?" Ethan asked, his concern for his mother evident despite his own situation. "They'll talk to her. If your home isn't safe right now, she might come stay where you are. The most important thing is that no one will be hurting you anymore." Outside, voices rose as Detective Okonkwo intercepted Chief Hayes, who had apparently decided to come to the medical cabin directly. Though the walls muffled their exact words, the confrontational tone was unmistakable. Ethan's breathing quickened at the sound of his stepfather's voice. Morgan quickly engaged him in conversation about his favorite camp activities, creating a bubble of normalcy amid the crisis. Minutes later, Alex returned, her expression tightly controlled. "They're taking Chief Hayes into custody. State police vehicles have arrived. Ethan, your mother is here and talking with Ms. Chun. Would you like to see her?" The boy nodded eagerly. "Is she mad at me?" "No, honey," Alex assured him. "She's very worried about you, but not mad at all." When Jessica Winters entered the cabin, Morgan recognized her from drop-off day, a slender woman with the same brown hair and eyes as her son, though hers held a perpetual wariness that was now crossed with confusion and fear. "Ethan?" she called uncertainly, then rushed forward as her son rose from his chair. She dropped to her knees, embracing him tightly. "Baby, what's happening?" "They're arresting Richard, saying something about hurting you." "I don't understand." Ethan pulled back slightly, his eyes searching his mother's face. "You really didn't know?" "Know what, sweetheart?" Morgan watched as Ethan, with remarkable courage, rolled up his sleeve to show the finger-shaped bruises. "He does this when you're at work. And worse things. In the basement." Jessica's face drained of color as she gently examined the marks. "Oh my God," she whispered. "How long? How long has this been happening?" "Since last summer," Ethan admitted. "He said you wouldn't believe me, that it would break your heart and you needed him because Dad left." Jessica pulled her son into another fierce hug, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I believe you," she repeated between tears. "I believe you, and I'm so sorry I didn't see it." Morgan quietly stepped outside to give them privacy, finding Alex in conversation with Ms. Chan and a state police captain who had arrived to oversee the situation. "How did this happen right under everyone's noses?" the captain was asking, clearly troubled that one of his law enforcement colleagues had been abusing a child. "Abusers in positions of authority are particularly skilled at hiding their behavior," Ms. Chen explained. "They understand systems and know how to manipulate perception. Chief Hayes likely cultivated an impeccable public image specifically as cover." "What happens now?" Morgan asked. "Hayes is being transported to the state police barracks for processing," the captain replied. "Given his position in the community, We're handling this with additional protocols to ensure there's no preferential treatment or opportunity for evidence tampering. Ms. Chun added, Ms. Winters and Ethan will be placed together in temporary housing tonight. Based on her initial statement, she appears to have been unaware of the abuse and shows appropriate protective responses now that she knows. We'll conduct a more thorough assessment, but our goal is keeping them together in a safe environment. Morgan felt a profound mixture of relief and lingering concern. Will Ethan receive counseling? This kind of trauma? Absolutely, Ms. Chun assured her. We have specialized trauma counselors who work with children in these situations. Given that the abuse has been ongoing for some time and involved psychological manipulation as well as physical harm, therapeutic support will be a priority. By evening, most of Camp Pinewood had emptied of campers, the usual end-of-session excitement overshadowed for staff by the day's dramatic events. Morgan sat with Alex in the director's cabin, both women emotionally drained but determined to document everything precisely for the inevitable legal proceedings ahead. You did exactly right, Alex said, pushing a mug of tea toward Morgan. Your rapport with Ethan created the safe space he needed to disclose what was happening. Morgan wrapped her hands around the warm mug. I keep thinking about what would have happened if he hadn't broken down today. If he'd just gotten in that car and gone home. But he did break down, and you did notice, and you did act, Alex said firmly. Focus on that. In child protection work, we can't dwell on the almost missed cases. They'd paralyze us. We celebrate the ones we catch, even at the 11th hour. The following weeks brought rapid developments. Richard Hayes was charged with multiple counts of child abuse, with additional charges added as the investigation uncovered evidence of his controlling and abusive behavior toward Jessica as well. His position as police chief had allowed him to isolate her through scheduling manipulation and monitor her communications under the guise of security concerns about her night shifts at the hospital. Morgan provided detailed statements and agreed to testify if needed, though the physical evidence in Ethan's recorded testimony were compelling enough that prosecutors believed Hayes might accept a plea deal rather than face trial. Jessica and Ethan moved in temporarily with Jessica's sister in a neighboring county, creating distance from the local publicity surrounding Hayes' arrest. With the support of victim services, Jessica filed for divorce and a permanent restraining order. 3 months after that fateful pickup day, Morgan received an email from Jessica, including a photo of Ethan starting 3rd grade at his new school. His smile genuine in a way it hadn't been at camp. He's seeing a wonderful therapist twice a week, Jessica wrote. The nightmares are becoming less frequent, and he's making friends at his new school. He talks about you often, about how you believed him when he was afraid no one would. The prosecutor says Richard will almost certainly accept the plea deal, which means Ethan won't have to testify in court. We're going to be okay. Thank you for being the person who noticed and acted when my son needed someone to stand up for him. Morgan printed the email and added it to a new bulletin board in her apartment, a reminder of why her chosen career path mattered so deeply. As she worked through her final semester of classes in child psychology, the theoretical concepts now carried the weight of lived experience. 6 months later, on a crisp fall afternoon, Morgan's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Riley? This is Detective Okonkwo. I thought you'd want to know that Richard Hayes accepted the plea deal this morning. 8 years minimum, with mandatory treatment and permanent restrictions on contact with children after release. Thank you for letting me know, Morgan said, feeling a weight lift she hadn't realized she was still carrying. How is Ethan doing? Thriving, from what I hear. His mother has become quite the advocate. She's helping organize a training program for hospital staff on recognizing signs of domestic abuse and child maltreatment. She credits you with showing her what one observant person can accomplish. After the call ended, Morgan sat at her desk, reflecting on how a single moment of professional attention, noticing a child's distress signal that might easily have been dismissed as ordinary end-of-camp emotions, had cascaded into life-changing intervention. 1 year later, Morgan stood nervously outside Lakeside Memorial Hospital, preparing to lead her first training session on recognizing child abuse. Signs, responses, and reporting. The hospital had initiated a comprehensive staff education program following the Hayes case, which had exposed how thoroughly a respected community figure could hide abuse in plain sight. As she gathered her materials, a familiar voice called her name. Looking up, she saw Jessica and Ethan Winters approaching. At 9, Ethan had grown taller, his face losing some of its childish roundness. Most noticeably, he carried himself differently, shoulders back, head high, the hypervigilant tension gone from his body. "We heard you were presenting today," Jessica explained, smiling. Ethan insisted on coming to say hello. The boy stepped forward, offering Morgan a slightly shy smile. "I made this for you," he said, holding out a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a framed drawing, clearly done with more skill than he'd possessed a year earlier, showing a campfire scene with counselors and children. At the bottom, he'd written, "Thank you for listening when I was scared. You changed my whole life." Morgan knelt to his level, meeting his clear, unburdened eyes. "Thank you, Ethan. This means more to me than you can imagine. Mom says I might be able to go back to Camp Pinewood next summer," he said hopefully. "She's not working nights anymore, and we have our own apartment, and everything's different now." "You'd be welcome any time," Morgan assured him. As they walked together toward the hospital entrance, Morgan reflected on the tremendous resilience children could show when given safety, support, and belief. The path to healing wasn't instantaneous or linear, but watching Ethan now, chatting animatedly about his art classes and new friends, affirmed that recovery was powerfully possible. In that silent moment of observation, Morgan understood. She hadn't just stopped the darkness, she had helped preserve a future. Recovery wouldn't be instant, but the foundation for safety had finally been laid, allowing the slow work of healing to begin. The training session that day would be the first of many throughout Morgan's career. Each one carried the same essential message. Listen, notice, because sometimes, in the space between a child's tears and an adult's question, entire lives could be transformed. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.